Chapter 506. The Jianghu arresters of Guannan were here to pick a fight. Anyway, this was Guanxi. What could they do even if they forced all the martial arts forces in Guanxi to rebel? It was the Guanxi branch that was having a headache. Moreover, Yin Batong had come with the intention of making trouble. He had even told his men not to worry so much. They could go too far, and if anything happened, he would take the blame. At this time, the people of the Lu family were filled with righteous indignation. This was going too far. If the Guanxi branch didn't care, they could go to the headquarters of the punishment hall to reason with them. But at this moment, a voice came from behind them. People from the Guannan branch came to Guanxi to arrest people. Who gave you the guts? Chu Xiu came with Ghost Hand King Tangya and a dozen other people. There was no anger on his face, but the oppressive atmosphere made the Jianghu arresters of Guannan slightly change their expressions. They had been arrogant here for a while, but Chu Xiu didn't show up. The words they had thought of didn't work, and the Ghost Hand King and the others didn't dare to meet them. So the Jianghu arresters of Guannan were very arrogant. But now, seeing Chu Xiu coming, and thinking of the rumors about Chu Xiu in the Guangzhong torture room and his reputation in Jianghu, even the Jianghu arresters who had been prepared couldn't help but feel a little nervous. But when they thought of Yin Batong behind them, the Jianghu arresters of Guannan torture hall seemed to be a little more courageous. He forced himself to say, "Official Chu, we didn't come to Guanxi to arrest people, but to trace the smuggling clues from Guannan to Guanxi." According to the rules of the Guangzhong torture room, if Official Chu wanted to take over the case, we would naturally hand it over. But Official Chu wasn't here before, so no one else was qualified to ask us to hand over the case. Chu Xiu stared at the cultivator from the Guannan branch. His expression didn't change in the slightest as he calmly said, "Let me ask you, who gave you the courage to come to Guanxi to arrest people?" Under Chu Xiu's gaze, the Guannan martial artist's forehead gradually oozed a layer of cold sweat, but he still forced himself to say, "Official Chu, I've already said that this is the rule." Chu Xiu waved his hand and cut off the martial artist's words. "I don't want to ask the same thing a third time. Since you don't want to tell me who gave you the courage, I'll just take it that you're extremely bold. Also, don't talk about rules with me. The premise of talking about rules is that you have the qualifications and strength. Only then can we play under the same rules. Who do you think you are to talk about rules with me?" Chu Xiu turned to Tangya and the others and said, "Break all their legs, abolish their martial arts, and let them crawl back to Guannan. I'd like to see if they still have the courage at that time." The Guannan martial artists' expressions suddenly changed, and they hurriedly said, "Official Chu, we are." But before they could finish speaking, Tangya and the others had already made their move. Previously, because of the Ghost Hand King's obstruction, Tangya and the others were unbearably aggrieved. Now that Chu Xiu had finally returned, if anything happened, Official Chu would naturally take responsibility. Since this was the case, what was there for them to be afraid of? Therefore, Tangya and the others directly attacked, and in an instant, the 8 Guannan martial artists' legs were broken and crippled. Miserable howls sounded instantly. Listening to the miserable howls, Lu Chengqian and the other Lu family members all trembled. Before, they still had some resentment towards Chu Xiu, but now they didn't even dare to have the slightest bit of resentment. At this time, Chu Xiu also looked at Lu Chengqian and said lightly, "Lu family head, you have been wronged during this time." Lu Chengqian hurriedly said respectfully, "Don't dare, my lord, please don't say that. It was those Guannan people who went too far." Chu Xiu shook his head and said, "I, Chu Xiu, am not an unreasonable person. As long as you are willing to abide by my rules, then if anything happens, it will be my responsibility. This time it was my negligence, I will compensate for your Lu family's loss." Saying this, Chu Xiu directly threw out a cultivation method, but it was not his own cultivation method, but an ordinary cultivation method passed down by the Guangzhong torture room to the Jianghu constables. It was only a third revolution cultivation method, but it was extremely precious for the Lu family. When Lu family head saw that cultivation method, although he was also extremely envious, he still said, "Official Chu, you don't have to do this, I am ashamed to accept it." Chu Xiu said lightly, "I told you to accept it, so accept it. I don't want to say the same thing twice." Hearing this, Lu family head immediately put away the cultivation method and shed tears of gratitude to Chu Xiu, without a trace of resentment in his heart. Ghost Hand King, who was behind, nodded. Milord's methods were getting more and more skillful. With such a combination of kindness and power, the Lu family would probably have to be respectful to Milord from now on, let alone resenting Milord. Listen to Official Chu. Even if you were wronged, Official Chu would make it up to you, and he would never let you suffer losses. On the contrary, if you were disobedient, the Guannan martial artists who were still wailing on the ground were a good example. One day after this incident, all the martial arts forces in the entire Guanxi area knew that Official Chu was back. In the past, when Chu Xiu was here, those martial arts forces still resented him in their hearts, feeling that Chu Xiu was too lenient and too strict. But this time, when people from the Guannan area came to their door, they realized that although Chu Xiu was a little strict, once something happened, they still needed Chu Xiu to take responsibility. Thus, not only did this incident not affect Chu Xiu's reputation, but it also caused his reputation to soar. Of course, while Chu Xiu's reputation soared, some people, such as Yin Batong, were furious at this time. Chu Xiu, you are so lawless. After seeing his 8 men's martial arts destroyed by Chu Xiu and their legs broken, Yin Batong was so angry that he directly smashed the table next to him. In fact, Yin Batong had already known the news that Chu Xiu returned to Guanzhong, but he did not ask his men to restrain themselves. Anyway, they had already caused trouble, so why should they restrain themselves? Chu Xiu was indeed famous in Jianghu, but here was the Guanzhong torture room. Everyone here was a torture officer, so everything had to be done according to the rules. Yin Batong had been in the Guanzhong torture room for a lifetime. No one knew these rules better than him. Chu Xiu was far from being able to compete with him in this aspect. However, Yin Batong did not expect that Chu Xiu did not care about the rules at all and directly destroyed 8 of his men. If Yin Batong swallowed this matter, he would not be able to stay in the Guanzhong torture room anymore. Let's go. Come with me to find Chu Xiu and ask for an explanation. As his voice fell, Yin Batong went straight to the Guanxi branch with a group of people. At the gate of the Guanxi branch, Tanya moved a chair over and leaned against it lazily to guard the door. Tanya naturally would not do something like guarding the door, but Chu Xiu had said that Yin Batong would definitely come to make trouble, so Tanya volunteered to guard the door here. He had also been very sullen during this period of time. If it were not for Ghost Hand Lord stopping him, not to mention Yen Bugui wanting to make a move, even he could not help but want to kill those arrogant guys. At this moment, at the end of the long street, Yin Batong came to the door with a gloomy face with a group of people. Seeing Tanya, Yin Batong said coldly, "Let Chu Xiu come out to see me." Tanya glanced at him and did not say anything. Yin Batong suddenly showed a touch of anger on his face and shouted, "I said, let Chu Xiu come out to see me. Are you blind or deaf? Didn't you hear me?" Tanya did not even look up and sneered, "Ridiculous. You don't even say your name? If you don't say your name, how would I know which Tom, Dick, or Harry you are? Besides, even if you say your name, Official Chu is busy with work, so he won't meet Tom, Dick, or Harry." Disrespectful words. You're courting death. Yin Budong's eyes showed a touch of anger. He took a step forward and immediately blasted a palm at Tanya. However, at this time, Tanya's figure was like a willow catkin. His figure was erratic and he easily dodged Yin Budong's palm. This caused Yin Batong to be taken aback. Yin Budong's nickname was the Shadowless Dragon. Although he was fat and short, his movement speed was not ordinary. However, where did this subordinate of Chu Xiu come from? He actually had such a cultivation level of speed at the 3-flower realm. However, after being stunned for a while, Yin Batong became even more furious and wanted to attack Tanya. However, at this time, Chu Xiu's cold voice came from inside. "Yin Batong, how dare you touch my people in my territory? Do you want to die?" Pushing the door open, Chu Xiu slowly walked out of the Guanxi branch with his men. When Yin Batong saw Chu Xiu, his eyes suddenly turned red, and he angrily said, "Chu Xiu, what do you mean by crippling 8 of my Jianghu constables? Killing each other is strictly prohibited in the Guanzhong torture room. What you've done has violated the rules of the torture chamber. If you don't give me an explanation today, I'll go to the hall master and ask for justice. Narrowing his eyes, Chu Xiu said faintly, Law? Justice? Yin Batong, you know what those idiots under your command did. They offended their superiors, and it's already good enough that I didn't kill them. And you, don't think that I don't know who gave them the courage to do this. Wei Juduan is dead, and the grudges of the past should be written off. However, you've provoked my bottom line again and again. Do you really want to die? When Chu Xiu said the last sentence, an extremely strong pressure suddenly fell on Yin Batong. It was extremely fierce, and it immediately made Yin Batong's hair stand on end. There was a serious look in his eyes. In fact, Yin Batong was also considered a figure in the Jianghu. As the torture officer of Guannan, he could be considered a veteran in the Jianghu. He was also a person with real power in the Guangzhong torture room. However, the problem was that compared to Chu Xiu, Yin Batong's experience was like a frog at the bottom of a well. It was not worth mentioning. Now, those who could compete with Chu Xiu were the top talents of the younger generation, as well as the warriors of the older generation who had reached the master realm. To put it bluntly, Yin Batong was now not even qualified to challenge Chu Xiu. Chapter 507. Under Chu Xiu's pressure, Yin Batong felt a sense of horror in his heart. This was a feeling of fear, and it made Yin Batong feel very ashamed. He was a martial artist of the older generation, and his experience in the Guangzhong torture room was much deeper than Chu Xiu's. But now, he was actually suppressed to such a state in front of Chu Xiu. How could Yin Batong tolerate this? Taking a deep breath, Yin Batong snorted coldly. Chu Xiu, don't talk so much nonsense. You crippled 8 of my subordinates. You have to give me an explanation for this matter. Chu Xiu raised his eyebrows. Explanation? You still want an explanation? Fine, I'll give you an explanation. As soon as he finished speaking, Chu Xiu's entire body was instantly enveloped by a murderous intent. A boundless ferocious aura covered Chu Xiu's entire body. With a punch, he executed the immortal slaying god, heaven extinguishing earth annihilating oblivion killing fist. Being enveloped by that boundless ferocious aura, Yin Batong was instantly shocked. He had never expected that Chu Xiu would actually attack without any hesitation. He had already used a killing move right from the start. This time, when he saw Chu Xiu, Yin Batong had a strange feeling. It was only now that he understood what was strange about Chu Xiu. This Chu Xiu's attitude was completely different from before. Although Chu Xiu was also very aggressive before, in the eyes of those in the Guangzhong torture room, Chu Xiu was still an outstanding figure among the younger martial artists. When facing other torture officers, he could still maintain a respectful attitude. Even when facing Yin Batong, who deliberately caused trouble for Chu Xiu actually retorted verbally within the rules. But this time, when Chu Xiu faced him again, his attitude was extremely unyielding. No, it would be more appropriate to say that he was arrogant. He had no scruples at all. This was the change in attitude brought about by the gap in strength. Chu Xiu was a person who abided by the rules, but at the same time, he was also a person who did not like to abide by the rules. Your strength is the same as mine, so I'll play with you within the rules. However, if you're weaker than me, then there's no need to talk about rules. You can just attack me. Currently, in the entire Guangzhong torture room, there weren't many people who were qualified to talk to Chu Xiu about the rules. Obviously, Yin Batong wasn't that person. Under Chu Xiu's punch, Yin Batong was horrified. His first reaction was not to block, but to escape. Yin Batong's figure moved, and his gang chi spread all over his body like a gale. Then he hurriedly retreated. However, at this moment, Chu Xiu's left hand formed a seal with a single hand. The wisdom fist seal was displayed, and in an instant, the gang chi field spread out. The net of heaven and earth, imprisoning everything. In the wisdom fist seal's gang chi field, Yin Batong's figure was not even as fast as a pheasant, not to mention a flying dragon. He could only watch as Chu Xiu's punch blasted towards him. The murderous aura was sharp, tearing everything apart. At this critical moment, A figure shrouded in a black robe suddenly appeared in front of Yin Batong and said in a hoarse voice, "Annihilating heaven and destroying earth, annihilating selfless killing punch? Young man, you've killed quite a lot of people. What do you think of this punch of mine?" As soon as he finished speaking, the black-robed man also blasted out a punch. The scarlet murderous aura around him condensed into a vortex, causing heaven and earth to howl and the wind and rain to change. It was actually the same annihilating heaven and destroying earth, annihilating selfless killing punch. As the two fists collided, the murderous aura on Chu Xiu's punch was instantly torn apart by the other party. A powerful force penetrated through his bones, causing Chu Xiu's expression to change. A wave of demonic aura rose around him, even with a wisp of golden light. This was the power that belonged to the nine heavens' demonic golden body. Bursts of demonic aura were heard, and Chu Xiu retreated more than 10 steps before he stopped. There was a hint of fear in his eyes as he looked at the black-robed man. The other party was also a martial Dao master, and he was much stronger than Xiao Liandong, who had died in his hands. The black-robed man looked at Chu Xiu and said with a chuckle, "I've heard about you from Si Ming. Young man, your strength is not bad, but don't be too arrogant. Don't think that you can look down on all martial Dao masters just because you killed a useless master." Yin Batong, who was behind, immediately heaved a sigh of relief when he saw the black-robed man make a move. In fact, before coming here, Yin Batong had not expected Chu Xiu to actually kill him. However, Yin Batong was a veteran of the Jianghu, and he was used to being cautious. After all, Chu Xiu had a reputation in the Jianghu for killing martial Dao masters. Therefore, Yin Batong had used the connections he had accumulated to find a backer. He had originally done this just in case, but he had not expected that this backer would really come in handy. Chu Xiu squinted at the black-robed man and asked, "Who are you?" The black-robed man stood with his hands behind his back and said calmly, "I'm Fang Sha, the second in command of the criminal division. Come to think of it, I can be considered your superior. You're also a secret agent of the criminal division." Yin Batong had spent his entire life in the Guanzhong torture room, so his connections were certainly not that simple. In the past, Fang Sha and Yin Batong had both been born at the bottom of the Guanzhong torture room, and they had worked their way up to their current positions. Although they were not life-and-death friends, and there was a huge gap between their current strength, they still had some ties. All these years, as the disciplinary officer, Yin Batong had only begged Fang Sha a few times. Instead, he had always kept in contact with him. This time, Yin Batong had asked Fang Sha for help, and Fang Sha would not refuse. Chu Xiu squinted at Fang Sha. He had heard of this person before. Although Chu Xiu was not a veteran of the Guanzhong torture room, after becoming the disciplinary officer of the Guanzhong torture room, he had learned many secrets about the Guanzhong torture room. The real combat power of the Guanzhong torture room was in the criminal division, and everyone in the Guanzhong torture room knew this. However, one could tell just by looking at the third leader, Si Ming. He was at the peak of the unity of heaven and man realm, and his combat power was extremely strong. Among the 4 disciplinary officers, the only one who could easily defeat Si Ming was the Guangdong disciplinary officer, Shao Yi. Even with Si Ming's strength, he was only the third leader. One could imagine how strong the second leader and first leader of the criminal division were. Guan Xiu was not the only martial arts grandmaster in the Guanzhong torture room. However, if there came a day when the Guanzhong torture room had to reveal all its strength, then the entire Guanzhong torture room would not be far from being destroyed. Chu Xiu had heard about Fang Sha's background from Mei Qinglian. His background could be considered legendary. He was originally a young lieutenant in the Eastern Qi army, but he was severely injured during a battle with the Northern Yan army and was thrown into a pile of corpses. It was Chu Kuanga who rescued him from the pile of corpses and brought him back to the Guanzhong torture room. After recovering from his injuries, Fang Sha changed his name and joined the criminal division. It was not only to repay a debt of gratitude, but also to seek revenge. It was only later that Fang Sha found out that the reason why he lost the battle with the Northern Yan army was that he was framed during the political struggle in the Eastern Qi imperial court. He was innocent and implicated in it. Therefore, Fang Sha had been staying in the criminal division ever since. His methods were ruthless and cruel. If Si Ming was said to be decisive and merciless, then Fang Sha's methods could be described as cruel. Moreover, after Fang Sha stepped into the martial arts grandmaster realm, he returned to the Eastern Qi alone to seek revenge and annihilated his enemy's entire family. According to Mei Qinglian, this matter had aroused some dissatisfaction from Guan Xiu. However, Guan Xiu did not stop Fang Sha. The criminal division was the Guanzhong torture room's last line of defense. It was also the Guanzhong torture room's most powerful trump card. Although Guan Xiu was the hall leader, her words did not really carry enormous weight. At the very least, Fang Sha and Guan Xiu were of the same generation. It was only because of Chu Kuang's kindness that he appointed Guan Xiu as the hall leader that he became obedient. However, Fang Sha would not only listen to Guan Xiu's words when it came to certain critical matters. Chu Xiu did not expect Yin Batong to have such a relationship. Looking at Fang Sha, Chu Xiu said calmly, "Leader Fang, this is a personal grudge between Yin Batong and me. You're the leader of the criminal division. Why are you interfering in this matter?" Fang Sha said in a hoarse voice, "Personal grudge? You're all from the Guanzhong torture room. What personal grudge is there? Young man, how long have you been in the Guanzhong torture room? Don't treat the torture room's rules like child's play." Chu Xiu narrowed his eyes and said, "This has nothing to do with how long I've been in the Guanzhong torture room. Some people have been in the Guanzhong torture room their entire lives, but they have achieved nothing. At the very least, I, Chu Xiu, have helped the Guanzhong torture room make a name for itself in the underworld. How can a person who does not do his job be qualified?" When Yin Batong heard this, he immediately became angry. However, he did not continue arguing with Chu Xiu. Yin Batong said to Fang Sha, "Brother Fang, there's no need to talk nonsense with him. Someone broke the Guanzhong torture room's rules. We can't let this matter go. Let's reason with the hall leader." Yin Batong had seen the power of Chu Xiu's punch just now. It was so powerful that it frightened him. When it came to Chu Xiu's strength, Yin Batong had lost the courage to fight him head-on. Moreover, based on his understanding of Fang Sha, their relationship was not to the extent that Fang Sha would teach Chu Xiu a lesson just to help him vent his anger. Yin Batong glanced coldly at Chu Xiu, snorted coldly, and left with Fang Sha. At this time, Tanya walked out and shook his head in disdain. Yin Batong has lived for so long, but in the end he only knows how to file a complaint. What a disgrace. Chu Xiu said indifferently, "Don't look down on filing a complaint. Sometimes, when the superior is accused too many times, even if you are in the right, it may become unreasonable. There's something called inertia. When someone files a complaint for the first time, the superior won't believe it. But when the second and third time, or a second or third person files a complaint, the superior will definitely think, why did someone have to file a complaint against you and not others? Is there a problem with you too?" When Tanya heard this, he wanted to refute. He had a feeling that Chu Xiu's words were fallacious. However, when he thought about it carefully, Tanya helplessly realized that what Chu Xiu said actually made sense. "Then, sir, what do we do now? Wait for Yin Batong to file a complaint?" Tanya asked. Chu Xiu's eyes flickered with an indecipherable light. "Of course we pack up and prepare to wait for the hall leader's summons. I want to see what tricks Yin Batong has up his sleeve this time." Chapter 508. The difference in strength would bring about a change in mentality. This was the case for the current Chu Xiu. In the past, when Chu Xiu was weak, he had to rely on the Guanzhong torture room to ensure his safety. Just like Chen Qingdi's evaluation of Chu Xiu's scheming was much deeper than Lu Fengxian's, and he did not have many principles. Therefore, Chu Xiu had chosen a reliable backer early on. At that time, Chu Xiu needed the Guanzhong torture room. Therefore, Chu Xiu had schemed in many ways and joined the Guanzhong torture room as an inspector. But now, Chu Xiu had become the fourth outstanding figure on the Longhu list. He also had the powerful battle power of a grandmaster. For the Guanzhong torture room now, it was no longer Chu Xiu who needed the Guanzhong torture room. It was Guanzhong torture room that needed Chu Xiu. Now, if Chu Xiu wanted to find a capable backer, There were many forces in the underworld who would gladly welcome Chu Xiu. Moreover, Chu Xiu could choose to directly expose his identity of the Devil Dao and completely appear in the underworld as a member of the Yinma lineage. Anyway, there were many ways out for Chu Xiu. If the Guanzhong torture room forced him, the fourth on the Longhu list, out of the Guanzhong torture room, he would really become a laughing stock in the underworld. A few days later, as expected, someone from the torture chamber's headquarters came to invite Chu Xiu to the torture chamber's headquarters. The person who came to invite Chu Xiu was Guan Siyu's disciple, Yuqi. After seeing Chu Xiu, Yuqi cupped his hands and said to Chu Xiu respectfully, "Official Chu, Yin Batong complained about you in front of Master. This matter is not small, so Master wants you to go and settle this matter." Yuqi's attitude toward Chu Xiu was very respectful. He simply regarded Chu Xiu as an existence on the same level as his master, Guan Siyu. Yuqi had always been a person who had a sense of propriety. Although Chu Xiu had joined the Guanzhong torture room at the beginning, Chu Xiu's status was as different as heaven and earth. Perhaps Yin Batong and the others who had been in the Guanzhong torture room for a long time still relied on their seniority to look down on Chu Xiu. However, in the eyes of the younger generation of warriors like Yuqi, Chu Xiu's achievements were absolutely at a level that they had to look up to. Yuqi understood very well that with Chu Xiu's current reputation and status in the underworld, the Guanzhong torture room needed Chu Xiu far more than Chu Xiu needed the Guanzhong torture room. Therefore, from Yuqi's speech just now, Chu Xiu could hear some inclination. Yuqi called Chu Xiu master, but he directly called Yin Batong by his name. This was already very obvious. Chu Xiu smiled and said, "Brother Yuqi, you don't have to do this. You and I are old acquaintances. Wouldn't this make us seem distant?" Yuqi just smiled and didn't say anything. Chu Xiu gave him face because Chu Xiu wasn't arrogant, but he couldn't take it for granted. After giving a few instructions to the Ghost Hand King and the others, Chu Xiu directly followed Yuqi to the torture chamber's headquarters. On the way, Chu Xiu asked, "Brother Yuqi, after Uncle Yin informed me, did Hall Master Guan have any reaction?" Yuqi said, "Master didn't have any reaction. He only said that he was gathering a few torture chamber masters to discuss matters and asked me to invite you over." Hearing Yuqi say this, Chu Xiu immediately had a plan in mind. The key to this matter didn't lie in Chu Xiu's side, but in Guan Siyu's attitude. Moreover, Chu Xiu also saw some other problems in this matter. It seemed that within the Guanzhong torture room, Guan Siyu actually didn't really mean what she said. It was true that the previous hall master, Chu Kuanga, always meant what he said, but compared to Chu Kuanga, Guan Siyu wasn't just lacking in strength and reputation, but also experience. Among the current generation of torture chamber masters, apart from Wei Judwan who had already passed away, the other three could be said to be of the same generation as Guan Siyu. Moreover, apart from the few of them, there was also Fang Sha, who was the second in command of the punishment chamber and the mysterious big leader. In the past, they only listened to Chu Kuanga. Although Guan Siyu had become the hall master, the punishment chamber couldn't possibly listen to Guan Siyu in everything like they did to Chu Kuanga. In fact, Chu Xiu had already sensed this before. The punishment chamber had so many chiefs, but only Si Ming always followed behind Guan Siyu. It was obvious that among these chiefs, only Si Ming was Guan Siyu's true confidant and would listen to Guan Siyu completely. Logically speaking, it was true that Chu Xiu had been overly ruthless in this matter. Chu Xiu was confident because of his current strength and status. As long as he didn't kill Yin Batong on the spot and put Guan Siyu on the spot, the final outcome of this matter would definitely be Guan Siyu punishing both parties. She would tell Yin Batong not to cause trouble, and she would also reprimand Chu Xiu for not abiding by the rules. But now Yin Batong had found Fang Sha. This was a trump card for Yin Batong, but in Chu Xiu's opinion, this was a foolish move. As the torture chamber master, Yin Batong was Guan Siyu's direct subordinate. Yet, he was now colluding with the second in command of the punishment chamber. What was the meaning of this? Was it because Guan Siyu, did things unfairly? Although Chu Xiu wasn't that well behaved, he had nothing to do with the group of old people in the Guanzhong torture room who had complicated relationships. Chu Xiu would forever be Guan Siyu's subordinate. In this case, Chu Xiu already had a rough idea of how things would develop. After following Yuqi to the Guanzhong torture room, Chu Xiu went straight to the meeting hall. The other torture chamber masters were already there. When Yin Batong saw Chu Xiu, he snorted coldly but didn't say anything. Although Chu Xiu's punch hadn't injured Yin Batong, the news had already spread. Some people even said that if Fang Sha hadn't intervened at the end, Yin Batong would definitely have suffered a huge loss at Chu Xiu's hands. Chu Simo smiled at Chu Xiu and said, "Official Chu, you've made a name for yourself in the pugilistic world this time. You killed a grandmaster and stepped into the 4th place on the Longhu leaderboard. Congratulations." Chu Xiu returned the greeting and said, "Official Chu, you don't have to be so polite. We both have the surname Chu, so it feels awkward addressing each other like this. Official Chu is my senior, so you can just call me by my name." Xiao Yi also chuckled and said, "I heard that you have a good relationship with that kid, Fang Qi Xiao? That kid isn't easy to deal with. It's a good thing you can stand him." Chu Xiu said in surprise, "Lord Xiao, you know Fang Qi Xiao?" Xiao Yi nodded and said, "Don't forget, I'm also from the Forgetting Sword Hut. Back then, when that kid, Fang Qi Xiao, was young, the people of Sword King City often brought him to the other major sword sects to show off. It was called a spar between the younger generation, but it was actually to show off. It's just that although that kid's sword is strong, his mouth is even worse. He was so angry that the disciples of the Forgetting Sword Hut almost fought him to the death, but I stopped them. However, that kid's progress is really terrifying. I'm also old. The junior from back then has now surpassed an old guy like me." Actually, Xiao Yi wasn't that old. His actual age was only around 40, and he was already at the peak of One with Heaven. He had the potential to become a martial Dao grandmaster in the future. However, compared to the young geniuses like Fang Qi Xiao and Chu Xiu, Xiao Yi seemed a little mediocre. Chu Xiu smiled and said, "Extraordinary people have extraordinary things. There's nothing wrong with Fang Qi Xiao's current personality. It's better than someone who likes to play tricks in the dark." At this point, Chu Xiu even glanced at Yin Batong. It was obvious that he was hinting that Yin Batong was stirring up trouble while Chu Xiu was nodding guanxi. "Also, Lord Xiao, you don't have to belittle yourself. With your strength, it's only a matter of time before you step into the martial Dao Grandmaster realm." Xiao Yi laughed and said, "That's the martial Dao Grandmaster realm. There are so many martial artists in the world, and there are countless who want to step into that realm. However, how many of them can break through this bottleneck? I, Xiao Yi, am not that ambitious. I'm already satisfied that I'm able to preserve this bit of strength." After exchanging some pleasantries with Xiao Yi, Chu Xiu also saw the second-in-command of the Criminal Investigations Division, Fang Sha. However, Fang Sha only sat there and did not say a word. Chu Xiu raised his brows. It seemed like he could tell from the seats that everyone present was divided into two sides. Xiao Yi was neutral, but he had always supported Guan Xiu. Therefore, he sat on the left with Chu Simo. Meanwhile, Fang Sha sat on the right with Yin Batong. However, Fang Sha did not appear to be very close to Yin Batong. After a while, Guan Xiu brought the Criminal Investigations Division's third-in-command, Si Ming, into the conference hall. Si Ming looked at everyone in the hall, but he did not choose to sit next to Fang Sha. Instead, he sat next to Chu Xiu. Chu Xiu secretly raised his brows. It seemed like his previous speculation was right. The Guanzhong torture room was not united, and the Criminal Investigations Division was the same. Looking around at everyone in the hall, Guan Xiu said in a low voice, "I believe everyone knows why I've gathered everyone here today. The Guanzhong torture room strictly forbids internal strife. This is the bottom line of the Guanzhong torture room. All these years, the Guanzhong torture room has established a foothold between the three countries. Every step we take can be said to be treading on thin ice. Internal strife, which is a waste of our strength for no reason, is absolutely not allowed to happen. Yin Batong, Chu Xiu, tell me, how should this matter be resolved?" Chu Xiu looked indifferent and did not speak, but Yin Batong stood up and cupped his hands at Guan Xiu. "Hall Master, Chu Xiu crippled 8 of my Jianghu constables. He is vicious and merciless. He doesn't think of himself as a member of the Guanzhong torture room at all. This fellow is so vicious to his own people. It is obvious what he is thinking. He is probably someone who has made a name for himself in the Jianghu and has grown strong enough to ignore the Guanzhong torture room. I'm afraid he already has disloyalty in his heart. When he said this, even Chu Xiu looked at Yin Batong with a trace of astonishment in his eyes. The older, the wiser. This fellow had fought with Wei Zhiduan in the Guanzhong torture room for such a long time. Other than being narrow-minded, his thoughts were also very sinister. His words directly turned the personal grudge between him and Chu Xiu into Chu Xiu not respecting the Guanzhong torture room and harboring disloyalty. And the crux of the matter was that Yin Batong was not wrong. Chu Xiu really thought so. Chapter 509. Following Yin Batong's words, everyone present turned to look at Chu Xiu. In all these years, although there had been infighting in the Guanzhong torture room, Chu Xiu was the one who had gone overboard. The other Guanzhong torture rooms infighting had been done in secret. Although there had been casualties, they had at least kept up appearances. But what about Chu Xiu? However, he had openly crippled 8 Guannan cultivators in front of everyone. His attitude could be said to be extremely arrogant. Guan Xiu didn't get angry. He just looked at Chu Xiu and said in a deep voice, "Chu Xiu, what do you have to say?" Chu Xiu knocked on the table, sighing with each knock. He said in an indignant tone, "Yin Batong, your words really make one's heart turn cold. If I, Chu Xiu, had any other intentions, would I still be sitting here? Yin Batong, do you know that the most favored 13th Prince Xiangchong of the Northern Yan Emperor had personally tried to recruit me and promised me an important position in the court? Yin Batong, do you know that the 2nd Prince LV Longguang of Eastern Qi, who was even more powerful than the Crown Prince, had promised me to join his army? Yin Batong, do you know that in West Chu, the World Alliance's Chunqing Di looked favorably upon me? His direct disciple Xie Xiao Lu and I were good friends? Eastern Qi, Northern Yan, West Chu, with my current strength and reputation, where can I not go in this big world? The reason I stayed in the Guanzhong torture room is because I, Chu Xiu, know what kindness is. In the past, when I was at my lowest, it was the Guanzhong torture room that took me in. Although I have a bit of reputation now, I don't want to abandon Guanzhong torture room. In the end, you're here spouting nonsense and pestering endlessly for the sake of forcing me to leave. Yin Batong, what sort of intentions do you have? Chu Xiu's words were full of self-righteousness, as if he had been greatly wronged. However, in the end he didn't say why he had crippled the 8 Guannan cultivators. Yin Batong snorted coldly and said, "Chu Xiu, don't try to change the subject here. How do you want to settle the matter of you crippling my 8 subordinates?" Chu Xiu narrowed his eyes and said, "How? Yin Batong, where were they crippled? In my Guanxi region. Don't you know why a cultivator from your Guanan land came to my Guanxi land?" Just as Yin Batong was about to say something, Chu Xiu interrupted, "Yin Batong, you don't have to say any more excuses. I don't want to hear them. I crippled 8 of your subordinates, but so what? I'm the Guanxi disciplinary officer. In terms of status, I'm above them. These 8 people didn't respect my superiors. In the long run, the Guanzhong torture room's discipline is bound to be lax. I crippled them now in order to reorganize the Guanzhong torture room's discipline. Isn't that fine?" Chu Xiu was clearly twisting words and forcing logic. Yin Batong secretly looked at Guan Xiu, but she was still expressionless and did not make a sound. Seeing this, Yin Batong also got a little anxious and secretly signaled to Fang Sha with his eyes. He did not plan on letting Fang Sha make a move on Chu Xiu. But in this sort of situation, Fang Sha stood on his side and spoke for him. That should be fine, right? Fang Sha coughed when he heard that and said in a hoarse voice, "Chu Xiu, even if we want to reorganize discipline, it's not your turn to make a move. You're the Guanxi disciplinary officer, but you came to deal with Guannan people. If this isn't overstepping your bounds, what is?" Chu Xiu retorted with a question. "Then what should I do?" Fang Sha said, "Naturally report it to the main hall." Chu Xiu sneered and said, "What a joke. I, a dignified Guanxi disciplinary officer, actually have to report it to the main hall to deal with a few low-level minor characters. Where's the dignity of a disciplinary officer? Moreover, if we're talking about overstepping your bounds, the one who really overstepped your bounds should be Lord Fong. Lord Fong, you should know what the criminal division does. Why are you here now? Fong Sha's eyes revealed a cold glint. Compared to arguing, he was still more willing to take action. Right then, Guan Xiu suddenly said in a deep voice, "All right, all of you shut up." Upon hearing this, everyone present immediately fell silent. Guan Xiu looked at Yin Batong and said in a deep voice, "Yin Batong, is your Guannan too idle? You even ran to the Guanxi area to investigate? In the future, it's best that you don't meddle in things that don't belong to you." Yin Batong looked at Guan Xiu in astonishment. He didn't understand why he would suddenly be reprimanded by Guan Xiu. Chu Xiu sneered inwardly. Yin Batong had too many schemes, but he just didn't understand the most critical point. Since he looked for Fang Sha and asked Fang Sha to speak up for him, it meant that Yin Batong was no longer on Guan Xiu's side. It could be said that he had completely offended Guan Xiu. Yin Batong wanted to retort, but he wasn't completely muddle-headed. In the end, he forcefully swallowed his retort. Meanwhile, Guan Xiu turned her gaze to Chu Xiu and snorted coldly. "Also, Chu Xiu, you've caused too much trouble outside recently. Do you still think you're outside after returning to the Guanzhong torture room? You'd better stay in the Guanxi area and reflect on your actions. You're not allowed to take a step out of the Guanxi area." After speaking, Guan Xiu waved her hand and said, "All right, this matter ends here. You're dismissed." Everyone present had a strange look on their faces. Only Yin Batong's expression was somewhat ugly. Even an idiot could tell that Guan Xiu was actually protecting Chu Xiu this time. It was obvious that Chu Xiu had crippled someone, but Yin Batong had been reprimanded. Although Chu Xiu had also been punished to reflect on his actions, this was nothing to Chu Xiu. Chu Xiu had just stepped into the unity of heaven and man realm. At this time, he needed to go into seclusion to sort out his strength and build a solid foundation. The so-called reflection could be considered seclusion. Anyway, Chu Xiu didn't plan on going out again. After everyone left, Chu Xiu hadn't left the main hall. At this time, Yuqi suddenly walked out and said in a low voice, "Official Chu, Master wants you to go over." Chu Xiu nodded in understanding and followed Yuqi to Guan Xiu's study. At the moment, Guan Xiu's face was expressionless. It was as if she hadn't been the one reprimanding Yin Batong and Chu Xiu. As she looked at Chu Xiu, Guan Xiu suddenly sighed and said, "Do you understand what happened before?" Guan Xiu's words were somewhat unclear, but Chu Xiu nodded and said, "I understand. It seems that in the entire criminal division, besides third leader Si Ming, the other two leaders don't seem to respect you, Hallmaster." Guan Xiu sighed again and said, "Ever since I took over the position of Hallmaster, I've been trembling with fear and trepidation. In the end, I developed the Guanzhong torture room to this stage. Unfortunately, to some people, I'm actually very lucky to be in this position." In the past, when Guan Xiu took over the Guanzhong torture room, it couldn't be said that he was lucky. It could only be said that Chu Kuanga had a good eye for talent. However, at that time, Guan Xiu didn't have the greatest authority in the Guanzhong torture room, but Chu Kuanga chose Guan Xiu to become Hallmaster. This was very puzzling. However, in the end, Guan Xiu succeeded and successfully developed the Guanzhong torture room to this stage. This puzzling turned into recognition. Unfortunately, in the Guanzhong torture room, there were still people who didn't recognize Guan Xiu. Not to mention these people's strength, just based on qualifications, they weren't inferior to Guan Xiu's. Chu Xiu said in a low voice, "In order for the Guanzhong torture room to reach its current scale, besides Chu Juxia's good foundation, it also couldn't do without Hallmaster's help. Some people just don't know how to appreciate favors. They need to be taught a lesson from time to time." Guan Xiu narrowed his eyes and said, "I've already taught them a lesson. There's no need for a second time." "Chu Xiu, you went from being a wanted person to becoming the Guanxi torture room's current Guanxi torture room. The Guanzhong torture room can give you many things. I just hope that you won't betray the torture room. This is the lightest punishment I can give you. If you do it again, you'll be punished severely." After hearing this, Chu Xiu lowered his head and walked out. Guan Xiu had just said that some people needed to be taught a lesson, but in the blink of an eye, Chu Xiu was taught a lesson. In fact, Chu Xiu's behavior this time was somewhat against the rules. He relied on sophistry. Guan Xiu could stand on his side completely because Yin Batong was muddle-headed and actually joined forces with the people from the Criminal Investigation Division. After leaving Guan Xiu's place, Chu Xiu planned to directly return to Guanxi. He did not expect Mei Qinglian to walk out from the small path with a smile on her beautiful face. "You came to the main hall once, yet you don't plan on coming to see me? Chu Xiu, you really have no conscience." Chu Xiu said with a bitter smile, "Madam, if I came to see you, I'm afraid it would be inappropriate. I just came out of Hall Master Guan's place." Mei Qinglian waved her hand and said, "Come with me. Don't worry. Guan Xiu is very worried right now, so she doesn't have time to care about you." Hearing Mei Qinglian say this, Chu Xiu directly followed Mei Qinglian to her room. After closing the door, Mei Qinglian chuckled and said, "You've made quite a name for yourself in West Chu this time. You even killed a martial arts grandmaster." Chu Xiu shook his head and said, "Madam Saintess, you don't have to make fun of me. You know my strength. The martial arts master I killed was only a weak rogue cultivator, and I had to use some tricks to kill him. If I encounter a real martial arts master, I can only choose to escape." Mei Qinglian waved her hand and said, "You don't have to be overly modest. With your current strength, you can already stand shoulder to shoulder with Zhong Xian and Zhang Qingzhen. My Yinma bloodline is lucky to have you among the younger generation. Otherwise, no one would be able to compete with Zhong Xian and Zhang Qingzhen. That little girl from the moon-worshipping cult is very mysterious. Moreover, she is from the bright demon bloodline, so she can't represent my Yinma bloodline." Chu Xiu nodded and said, "That's right, Madam Saintess. Guan Xiu still can't completely control the Guanzhong torture room. Is it because of those people from the criminal division?" Mei Qinglian snorted and said, "What else do you think? I can deal with Guan Xiu, but I can't deal with others. If it weren't for those annoying guys, the Guanzhong torture room would have become a secret branch of my Yinma bloodline. Would I still need to be so careful?" Chapter 510. Mei Qinglian had stayed in the Guanzhong torture room for a long time. Her understanding of the Guanzhong torture room was naturally much deeper than Chu Xiu's. There was no need to explain why a Yin demon sex saintess was lurking in the Guanzhong torture room. The reason why Mei Qinglian had not succeeded all this time was not because of Guan Xiu, but because of the two leaders of the punishment department and the other people from the punishment department. The reason for this was not because Guan Xiu was not strong enough, but because Guan Xiu had been too hasty when he took over the Guanzhong torture room. In fact, Chu Kuanga had already decided to help Guan Xiu to the position of Hall Master. It was just that Chu Kuanga's death was too hasty. If Chu Kuanga had enough time to help Guan Xiu establish her prestige, then so many things would not have happened. Chu Xiu narrowed his eyes and said, "Saintess, since the two people from the punishment department are so troublesome, why don't you think of a way to get rid of them? With the Yinma clan's strength, it shouldn't be difficult to get rid of them, right?" If the Yinma clan could really control the Guanzhong torture room, Chu Xiu would not need to be so secretive. Mei Qinglian glanced at Chu Xiu and said with slight surprise, "You're quite vicious. You're prepared to kill right from the start? It's not that I can't do that, but I want a complete Guanzhong torture room, not a broken Guanzhong torture room. Although Guan Xiu would listen to me on some matters, he wasn't my puppet. He was only dissatisfied that the Criminal Investigation Department didn't listen to his orders. He didn't want to ruthlessly eliminate the true trump card of the Guanzhong Disciplinary Hall, the Criminal Investigation Department. Once I do that, Guan Xiu will definitely sense that something is wrong. What should I do then? He even killed Guan Xiu?" Chu Xiu nodded, but he did not agree with Mei Qinglian's view. There was no construction without destruction. It was impossible for the Yinma clan to hide in the dark forever. If they wanted more power, they had to use extraordinary means. After chatting with Mei Qinglian for a while, Chu Xiu did not stay any longer. He directly left the headquarters and returned to the Guanxi land to cultivate. He didn't know when it started, but Chu Xiu had become accustomed to considering everything from the perspective of the demonic path. It wasn't because Chu Xiu, the fake inheritor of the Kunlun devil cult, was so loyal to the Yinma bloodline, but because Chu Xiu discovered that in his current situation, the identity of the Yinma bloodline was much more useful than his current identity, and he could be unscrupulous. After returning to Guanxi, Chu Xiu immediately entered seclusion. One reason was to stabilize his current realm, and the other was to cultivate the Nine Heavens Fiend golden body to match his current cultivation. While Chu Xiu was in seclusion, a huge stronghold stood in the dense forest of the northern Yan's Liaodong County. The entire stronghold was covered in white snow, and it would be impossible to find it unless one went deep into the forest. At that moment, there was a circle of chairs in the stronghold's lobby. Two bold words hung on the top of the lobby, Qilian. Right below the two words Qilian, a burly man sat on a chair made of white tiger skin with a gloomy expression on his face. The burly man was tall and sturdy. His exposed muscles seemed to be cast from steel. The most peculiar thing about him was his appearance, which was actually crimson. At that moment, the burly man looked at the people below and said in a deep voice, "Tell me, how many have we lost during this period of time?" A skinny cultivator smiled bitterly and said, "First leader, within a month, all 7 of our strongholds were destroyed. Our brothers suffered heavy casualties. If we can't do it, we can only ask our brothers to retreat." At that moment, another tall warrior stood up and shouted, "Lin Mingtong, what did you say? Withdraw?" It wasn't easy for us to solve the problem of the Northern Yan Imperial Court through the 13th Prince Xiangchong, and let the stronghold walk out of the Liaodong forest. Now you want us to withdraw? Won't our efforts be in vain? Lin Mingtong frowned and said, "What else are you going to do?" The righteous manor joined forces with more than 10 sects in eastern Yan to suppress our Qilian stronghold. If we don't withdraw our forces, we can only be defeated one by one. The 36 bandits of the northern land are already in the past. Now, only our Qilian stronghold still exists. If we continue to fight with them, we have no chance of winning. The warrior retorted, "The righteous manor's goal is to force our Qilian stronghold into the Liaodong forest. In the end, they even want to force us out of the northern Yan, or even kill us in one fell swoop. If we take a step back, they will take a step forward. In the end, our Qilian stronghold will have no way to retreat. What are you afraid of? At worst, we will perish together with the righteous manor and fight to the death." Lin Mingtong sneered and said, "He Zhan, wake up. We are no longer the 36 bandits of the northern land. What do we have to perish together with them and fight to the death? I'm afraid that in the end, the fish will die, but their net will not be broken." The group of people below was making a ruckus. The red-faced strong man sitting on the main seat suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood. His originally red face was now slightly pale. The people who were still making a ruckus suddenly panicked and hurriedly shouted, "First Master!" The red-faced strong man waved his hand and sneered, "It's all right. Stone General Han Baxian's strength is indeed not for show." The power of the Haoyang 9 Extremes mysterious art is not inferior to that of the Great Light Temple's bald donkeys. However, Han Baxian was also hit by my flaming divine palm, so he did not feel good either. Which hypocrite of the righteous manor, Ngurenlong, did not dare to make a move, but Han Baxian made a move first. But it's all right. Even if the two of them were to attack together, I am not afraid. In the past, I, Pang Hu, had withstood the imperial court and the northern fluttering snow city. If they want to kill me now, it will not be that easy. This red-faced strong man was none other than the last survivor of the 36 bandits of the northern land, the master of the Qilian Iron Cavalry, red-faced Heavenly King, Pang Hu. In the past, when Chu Xiu was in Wei County, he had dealt with the red-faced Heavenly King Pang Hu's subordinates, Han Bao and the others. He had also borrowed the strength of Han Bao and the others. However, after Chu Xiu had left Wei County, he had already revealed Pang Hu's location to Han Bao and the others, and instructed them to look for Pang Hu. However, it seemed that the plot had deviated. Pang Hu's Qilian stockade was now in conflict with the righteous manor, and from the looks of it, They were forced to the extreme. Looking at the people below, Pang Hu wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and said in a low voice, "There's no other way. For the time being, recall the people from the other stockades. However, leave some people outside to keep an eye on the righteous manner's movements. Be careful." He Zhan was slightly unwilling. "First Master, are we going to have to give in?" Pang Hu snorted coldly. "Of course this matter is not over. However, with just the strength of the Chilean stockade, we can only fight the righteous manner head-on. The outcome is that our chances of winning are not high. You are all my old brothers who have followed me for decades. Naturally, I will not let you die with me." He Zhan and the others immediately said, "First Master, when have we, the Chilean Iron Cavalry, ever been afraid of death? In the past, we even dared to go against the Northern Yen Imperial Court, let alone the righteous manner." Pang Hu waved his hand and said, "All right, you are not afraid of death, but I do not want to die with you. I have never begged anyone in my life, but now, I can only ask for help." He Zhan was stunned. "Beg who?" Pang Hu's expression was a little ugly. After hesitating for a while, he said, "I beg a woman from the Inma clan." Pang Hu was conflicted because he wanted to beg a woman. However, the people below were concerned that the First Master actually wanted to beg someone from the demonic Tao. They really did not know that the First Master actually had such an important relationship with the demonic Tao. Lin Mu Tong said hesitantly, "First Master, as far as I know, the Inma clan is not having it easy either. They are being chased by the righteous sects, and their relationship with the bright demons is not good. If we are related to them, will we attract trouble?" Although the Northern 36 bandits did not have a good reputation, that was only a matter of the Northern Yen Imperial Court. In other places, they did not care who the Northern 36 bandits were. As for the Inma clan, they were ostracized by the entire Jianghu. Pang Hu snorted lightly, "Our Chilean stockade is already at the point of life and death. How can we care so much? Regardless of whether they are from the demonic Tao or the evil Tao, I am already prepared to throw away my pride and beg for help. Are you still not willing?" Hearing Pang Hu's words, the others did not say a word. In the past, during the era of the Northern 36 bandits, Pang Hu was not the strongest among the 36 bandits. However, his character was the most stubborn one. Indeed, he had never begged for help. "Han Bao, this time, you will make the trip." Following Pang Hu's words, Han Bao stood up and said respectfully, "Yes, leader." At this time, Han Bao already had the cultivation of the three-flower realm. For a talent like him, it was already somewhat incredible. In the past, Han Bao was Pang Hu's personal guard. After he joined forces with Chu Xiu, Han Bao earned a lot of gold and silver resources from Shangmang Mountain. Originally, he could have continued to dominate Shangmang Mountain. However, he was loyal to Pang Hu and traveled thousands of miles to bring things to Pang Hu. This made Pang Hu quite touched. Therefore, among Pang Hu's subordinates, Han Bao's strength was not as good as Lin Mutong, He Zhan, and the others. However, he was the most trustworthy one. After sending the others away, Pang Hu handed a letter to Han Bao and said, "Go to the Guanzhong torture room and give this letter to Guan Siu's wife, Mei Qinglian. Tell her whatever she asks you. There is no need to hide anything from her. Tell her that as long as she helps our Chilean stockade solve the crisis this time, if her hidden devil clan needs us in the future, our Chilean stockade will go through fire and water without hesitation." When he mentioned that Mei Qinglian was Guan Siu's wife, Pang Hu suddenly paused. His tone became a little strange, as if he had eaten a fly. Han Bao was a little curious and wanted to ask something, but he was stopped by Pang Hu's glare. "If I ask you to go, just go. Why are you asking so many questions?" Chapter 511. A month later, in the backyard of the Guanzhong torture room, Han Bao stood there trembling with fear. He did not dare to look at the woman in front of him. Previously, Han Bao had wanted to ask Pang Hu why he had sought help from the demonic path, but in the end, he had come to find Guan Siu's wife. But when he saw Mei Qinglian, Han Bao realized how terrifying this woman in front of him was. She was so beautiful that he did not dare to look at her directly. Similarly, Her strong aura did not let Han Bao have any improper thoughts. This woman was like a poisonous rose. She looked gorgeous, but as long as you touched her lightly, the poison would be able to kill you without leaving even your bones. Holding the letter written by Pang Hu, Mei Qinglian smiled and shook her head. Pang Hu, that big fool, is still so stubborn. I told him before that the 36 bandits of the northern land have no future. If you want to go against the imperial court, you have to find a way to do it. Just like the 36 bandits of the northern land. If the imperial court does not destroy them, who else would they destroy? Now that you are struggling at death's door and have preserved some of your strength, why are you going against the Morgue village? Although Han Bao was very dissatisfied with Mei Qinglian's description of them as struggling at death, he thought of Pang Hu's previous instructions. Han Bao could only say obediently, this time, it really wasn't our Qilian stockade village that started the trouble. After the 36 bandits of the northern land were destroyed, Qilian village has nothing to do with them. This time, it was the Morgue village who initiated the trouble. They even united more than 10 aristocratic families of the northern Yan and formed the Morgue village alliance to kill Qilian village. The head of the Morgue village, Nie Renlong, pretended to be benevolent and was despicable. He was not confident that he could defeat the first master in a one-on-one fight. He even asked the northern Yan martial arts tycoon, Stone General Han Ba, to fight first. The great leader fought with Han Ba and both of them suffered some injuries. The great leader really couldn't hold on any longer, so he sent me to ask the Hidden Devil clan for help. As long as the Yinma clan helps Qilian stockade village to overcome this crisis, if the Yinma clan needs anything in the future, Qilian stockade village will not hesitate to go through water and tread on fire. Mei Qinglian chuckled. Suddenly, like a flower blooming, the whole room seemed to be brighter. However, Han Bao still did not dare to look at Mei Qinglian. Instead, he lowered his head even more. Why is Pang Hu acting so serious? We're old acquaintances. How can I ignore him when he's begging me? All right, you can wait here for a few days. I will find you a reliable person to ensure that your Qilian stockade village can survive this crisis. Han Bao heaved a sigh of relief when he heard what Mei Qinglian said. However, he was also curious about the relationship between the first leader and Madame Guan. Both parties seemed to have a past. Although Han Bao was gossipy, he did not dare to think that Pang Hu and Mei Qinglian had an old relationship. Although Han Bao still admired the first leader, after meeting Mei Qinglian, he knew that a woman like Mei Qinglian could not be tamed by an ordinary man. It was the same for his first leader, Pang Hu. In the Guanxi Punishment Hall, where Chu Xiu was cultivating in seclusion. At this moment, Chu Xiu's upper body was naked. His entire body was enveloped in boundless devil qi. The devil qi was extremely pure, but at this moment, the devil qi had turned into needles and seeped into Chu Xiu's body. It cleansed all of Chu Xiu's meridians and all of his qi and blood. When the devil qi refined his body, the intense pain was like a death by 1,000 cuts. It penetrated deep into his bones. Even though Chu Xiu's mental strength was strong, he could not shield himself from the pain. He could only endure it. Chu Xiu's body was trembling slightly. Sweat flowed out from his pores like water. There was even a trace of blood mixed in it. However, he endured it and did not make a sound. After all, the soundproofing of the seclusion was not very good. If Chu Xiu made any sound inside, people outside might think that Chu Xiu was doing something strange while cultivating in seclusion. At this moment, a black mist rose from the seclusion. Mei Qinglian's figure walked out of it. She looked at Chu Xiu with interest, who was cultivating the 9 heavens' demonic golden body. Chu Xiu had already sensed that Mei Qinglian was the moment she appeared. Therefore, Chu Xiu was not nervous. He just cultivated step by step. After completing this stage of refining his body, Chu Xiu withdrew the devil qi around his body. Seeing that Mei Qinglian was still staring at him, Chu Xiu picked up the clothes beside him and put them on. He was a little speechless. Saintess, can you tell me the next time you appear? Don't appear and disappear so mysteriously. Let me be mentally prepared. Mei Qinglian snorted and said, You are cultivating in bed, not playing with women in bed. Why do you need to be mentally prepared? Chu Xiu smiled bitterly. How could he reply to Mei Qinglian's tough words? Just now, you cultivated Marquis Lu Wenho's 9 heavens demonic golden body? Mei Qinglian asked curiously. Chu Xiu nodded. Mei Qinglian shook her head and said, this cultivation method's conditions are too harsh. With your physique, you can cultivate it. However, if it were someone else, I'm afraid that they would easily waste themselves. Although this cultivation method is called the 9 transformations, it is the lowest among the 9 transformations. There are only a few who can cultivate it to the peak. He just obediently recuperated in the dense forest of Liaodong and steadily developed his forces. Step by step, he built a branch. He even reached a reconciliation with the Northern Yan imperial court through his relationship with the 13th prince, Xiang Chong. However, maybe even God did not want Pang Hu's men to have a good time. The Morgue Manor actually joined forces with more than 10 forces to enter Liaodong. They wanted to completely destroy Qilian village and had almost pushed Pang Hu to the limit. And in the original plot, Chu Xiu did not remember that the Morgue Manor had once formed an alliance. Now it seemed that there was a deviation in the plot. Chu Xiu thought for a while and said in a low voice, Saintess, this is not a good task. The Morgue Manor has a grudge with me, that's true, but there are 2 martial Dao grandmasters in the Morgue Manor. Qilian village is also being suppressed by them. What can I do if I go alone? If I want to reverse the situation, it will be extremely difficult. Mei Qinglian rolled her eyes and said, if it was easy, would I still come to you? Don't think that this is a hard task. The benefits you can get after this will be beyond your imagination. You don't know Pang Hu's character. He rarely asks for help and hates owing favors. If you help him this time, Pang Hu will feel that he owes you a favor for a lifetime. As long as you don't deliberately send him to his death, if you need Pang Hu's help in the future, he will definitely not refuse. The power of the Qilian Iron Cavalry is also extraordinary. They were the existence that could fight against the 5 armies of the Northern Yan Kingdom. They are definitely stronger than you think. Chu Xiu moved his body and revealed a thoughtful look in his eyes. Now, Chu Xiu was no longer the demonic junior, who could only obey orders. With Chu Xiu's strength and ability, he had the right to refuse and also the right to negotiate, even if the other party was Mei Qinglian, the saintess of the Shadow Demon sect. So now, Chu Xiu was only thinking about the benefits of this matter and whether it was worth it for him to take action. Chapter 5:12. Speaking of which, Chu Xiu and the 36 northern bandits were fated. After all, Chu Xiu relied on the cooperation of Han Bao and the others to successfully establish a foothold in Wei County. So now, Chu Xiu did not mind helping Pang Hu once. Of course, the premise was that Mei Qinglian did not deceive him. By the way, Holy Maiden, I am now under house arrest by Guanxiu. How can I help him? At least help me lift the band first. Chu Xiu suddenly thought of this. Mei Qinglian raised her eyebrows and said, this time, I want you to use your brain, not your hands. There is no need for you to go with your current identity. Moreover, this time, Pang Hu is asking the Yinma clan for help. You can go with your identity as a demon. Chu Xiu nodded and said, since that's the case, I'll have to trouble you to take care of the Guanxi land while I'm away. I don't want them to bully me when I return. Mei Qinglian casually waved her hand and said, don't worry, what happened last time won't happen again. You caused such a big commotion. As long as Yin Badong isn't an idiot and sees Guanxiu's attitude, he won't cause trouble again. Moreover, Guanxiu won't tolerate him a second time. Chu Xiu nodded and said, in that case, take me to see Han Bao. After all, he is also an old acquaintance of mine. Mei Qinglian said in surprise, you know that guy? Chu Xiu nodded and said, I have some dealings with him. Mei Qinglian did not gossip too much about Chu Xiu's previous problems. After Chu Xiu changed his mask and black clothes, he followed Mei Qinglian to see Han Bao. Han Bao, who had been waiting anxiously for a few days, suddenly became excited when he saw Mei Qinglian bringing a mysterious man dressed in black and wearing a mask. Han Bao had never come into contact with people from the Devil Dao. He didn't even know the difference between the bright devil and the hidden devil lineage. However, after listening to Pang Hu's detailed explanation, Han Bao thought that the experts of the Yinma clan must be like the person in front of him. They appeared incomparably mysterious, but they were powerful and possessed unique skills. However, when Chu Xiu walked closer, Han Bao suddenly felt that the person in front of him seemed to be only at the unity of heaven and man realm. Although to Han Bao, the oneness of heaven and man state was also a master, but to the current predicament of the Chilean village, the oneness of heaven and man state was nothing. Han Bao asked cautiously, "Lady Saint, is this the person you found to help my Chilean stockade?" Mei Qinglian nodded. "Yes." Han Bao asked hesitantly, "But this lord is only at the unity of heaven and man realm?" Mei Qinglian stared at him. "Why, are you looking down on the person I found for you?" Han Bao quickly waved his hand. No. That's not what I meant, I just... However, before Han Bao could finish, he was interrupted by Mei Qinglian. "It's not easy for Pang Hu to beg me. Of course, I won't be perfunctory with him. This is Lin Yi, the #1 talent among the younger generation of the Yinma clan." Han Bao was stunned. Not only was he at the oneness of heaven and man realm, but he was also a martial artist of the younger generation? Mei Qinglian said lightly, "Do you know Zhang Qingzhen?" Han Bao nodded. "Do you know Zhong Xian?" Han Bao continued to nod. "Do you know Chu Xiu?" Han Bao nodded even more frantically this time. Of course, he knew Chu Xiu. To be honest, Han Bao did not expect that the boy who was ostracized by the Chu family in Wei County would become the 4th on the Longhu leaderboard. He was a young talent who was famous in Jianghu. When he heard that Chu Xiu was serving as the torturer in the Guanzhong torture room, Han Bao wanted to look for Chu Xiu to reminisce about the old days. However, he gave up on the idea after a flash in his mind. Firstly, his status as compared to Chu Xiu was as different as heaven and earth. It was unknown if Chu Xiu would still remember him. Secondly, he came with a mission. The rise and fall of Chilean village were in his hands. Han Bao did not dare to act recklessly in case he caused any trouble. At this moment, Mei Qinglian pointed at Chu Xiu and said lightly, "There are geniuses in Taoism, Buddhism, and Guanzhong torture room. Naturally, there are geniuses in the Yinma clan. Lin Ye's strength is not inferior to Zhang Qingzhen, Zhong Xian, and Chu Xiu. If Pang Hu did not come to me personally, do you think I would have sent the most outstanding young talent in the Yinma clan to help him? Are you still not satisfied with the result?" Hearing Mei Qinglian's words, Han Bao quickly said, "I'm satisfied, of course I'm satisfied." Speaking of this, Han Bao took a few glances at Chu Xiu. The more he looked at him, the more he looked like an expert. Of course, Han Bao did not know how powerful the young talents were. Anyway, he only heard that the top 5 on the Longhu list had the strength to fight against a martial Dao master. Since Mei Qinglian said that Lin Yi could stand shoulder to shoulder with Zhang Qingzhen and Zhong Xian, he would definitely be able to fight against a grandmaster. Inviting him was equivalent to inviting a martial Dao grandmaster back, and the great leader's task could be considered completed. Thinking of this, Han Bao had no choice but to bid farewell to Mei Qinglian and prepared to return to Liaodong with Chu Xiu. On the way, Han Bao asked Chu Xiu curiously, "May I ask which sect does Mr. Lin belong to in the Yinma clan?" Previously, Han Bao thought that the Yinma clan was just a sect. It was only when Pang Hu informed Han Bao about it that the Yinma clan was also divided into sections. However, looking at Lin Yi and Mei Qinglian, they did not seem to be from the same sect. Chu Xiu chuckled and said in a hoarse voice, "If I say that I'm from the Kunlun devil cult, would you believe me?" Han Bao's expression changed slightly. He forced a smile and said, "Mr. Lin, you must be joking." No matter how inexperienced Han Bao was, he knew that the Kunlun devil cult was a taboo in Jianghu. Its identity was much more sensitive than the Yinma clan. However, Han Bao did not know why he had a strange feeling that he seemed to know the person in front of him. However, Han Bao did not think too much about it. At the moment, Chilean village was in a critical situation. Han Bao did not have the leisure to chat with Chu Xiu and delay time. Instead, he rushed all the way to Liaodong County. Although Chu Xiu had stayed in the northern Yan for a long time, he had never been to such a northern place. Liaodong County was close to the extreme north. Almost half of the 4 seasons of the year were covered in snow, especially in the dense forest of Liaodong, which was covered in snow all year round. It was very desolate. At this moment, in the main hall of Qilian village, Pang Hu and his men looked solemn. During the time when Han Bao was away, Qilian village's situation became more and more difficult. It was difficult for 2 fists to fight against 4 hands. There were too many people in the Loyalty Village Alliance, so many that they could not fight against them. At this moment, someone came in from outside and reported, "Leader, Brother Han Bao has brought someone back." Upon hearing this, everyone's eyes were filled with joy. The reinforcements had finally arrived. Pang Hu nodded and said, "Invite him in." Everyone looked at the door in anticipation. However, when they saw that the person Han Bao brought in was only an oneness of heaven and man realm martial artist who was dressed up mysteriously, they were stunned. Han Bao's trip only brought back a martial artist at the unity of heaven and man realm? What was the use of that? Although oneness of heaven and man realm martial artists were not weak, Qilian village did not lack them. For example, Lin Mutong, He Zhan, and a few of Pang Hu's confidants were all oneness of heaven and man realm experts. Pang Hu also had doubts in his heart, but he still asked Chu Xiu to sit down first before asking Han Bao, "Han Bao, is this the reinforcement you brought?" Han Bao quickly said, "That's right. This is young Master Lin Yi, an outstanding talent of the Hidden Devil Clan's younger generation. He is comparable to the top 5 talents on the Longhu leaderboard." Upon hearing this, everyone's expression became even weirder. So this Lin Yi was actually a martial artist of the younger generation? As for Han Bao saying that Lin Yi was comparable to the top 5 of the Longhu leaderboard, they treated it as a joke. If the top 5 of the Longhu leaderboard were so easily comparable, what was the point of Wind Sweeping Tower making this leaderboard? Did they really think that Zhang Qingzhen and the others were vegetarians? He Zhan slammed the table angrily, stood up and scoffed, "Han Bao, I think you're out of your mind. You came all the way to the Guanzhong torture room and you only brought back an oneness of heaven and man realm martial artist. Are you treating the lives of my brothers in Qilian village like a joke?" Han Bao looked aggrieved. Mei Qinglian was the one who gave him the person. He also wanted to bring back a martial Dao master, but she did not give him the Saintess. What did it have to do with him? Just as Han Bao was about to explain, Chu Xiu, who was sitting on a chair, laughed strangely and said, "What? Is everyone looking down on me and disdaining me for being weak? What a joke. Your Qilian stockade village is about to be exterminated, yet you're still being so picky. If it wasn't for the Saintess, do you really think that I would care about the life and death of your Qilian stockade village? Brat, you're asking for it." He Zhan roared. His vigor chi exploded and he pounced at Chu Xiu like a ferocious tiger. He punched and the roar of a tiger echoed in the forest. Pang Hu, who was sitting at the top, frowned and wanted to stop him. Regardless of whether this person could help his Qilian village, Lin Yi was sent by Mei Qinglian. Pang Hu could not watch him get hurt. He Zhan was one of Chu Xiu's subordinates, and was a wandering cultivator. Although he was not a bad person, he had a fiery temper and was easily angered. During this period of time, he had been suppressed too much, so when Chu Xiu casually said a few words, he was immediately enraged and exploded. However, before Pang Hu could make a move, the next scene made everyone's eyes widen. Boundless darkness gathered in Chu Xiu's eyes like a deep whirlpool. The revolving magic of mind demons was unleashed. Chu Xiu's mental strength was condensed into a substance by Chu Xiu, forming 3 transparent strings in front of him. As Chu Xiu gently plucked the strings, the demonic sound instantly suppressed and seized souls, emitting an ear-piercing shriek on the soul level. The 3 invisible strings were shattered, and He Zhan also let out a miserable howl as his body was directly sent flying, smashing into a chair. Soul-suppressing Hades song. Chapter 5:13. As the inherited secret techniques of the Demon Heart Hall, The mental demon rotation technique and the 9 forms of soul assimilation were definitely the pinnacle of mental strength among the same techniques. In Chu Xiu's opinion, they were even stronger than the Xiahou clan's spirit control technique. In the past, when Chu Xiu used the soul-subduing Hades song of the 9 forms of soul assimilation, it could even temporarily affect Qiao Liandong, a martial arts master. Now that Chu Xiu had recovered to his peak, it was naturally not a problem to use the soul-subduing Hades song to deal with Hejan, a unity of heaven and man realm martial artist. Hejan rubbed his head as he crawled up from the pile of broken chairs, his eyes filled with horror. Although he was a little rash and easily angered, he was still knowledgeable. This guy's mental strength secret technique was so powerful that he didn't even have the chance to react in a single exchange. However, Hejan still hardened his tone and snorted coldly. "You only know how to use this kind of trick. Fight me head-on if you can." As he said that, Hejan was unwilling to admit defeat and wanted to charge forward. However, at this moment, Lin Mingtong said in a deep voice, "Let me do it." When he was under Pang Hu, Lin Mingtong often quarreled with Hejan. Between the two of them, one was impulsive while the other was rational. Usually, they wouldn't be on the same page. However, when facing outsiders, they were brothers who had gone through life and death together and were willing to entrust their backs to each other. A pitch-black spear that was as tall as 2 people was held in Lin Mingtong's hand. With an unparalleled aura and whistling strong wind, it smashed down at Chu Xiu. The powerful aura was simply unbelievable. It was unleashed by a seemingly skinny and weak martial artist like Lin Mingtong. This time, Chu Xiu didn't use the 9 forms of soul assimilation. He merely formed seals with both hands and displayed the Great Vajra Divine Strength Dharma form. Stellar energy erupted around him, condensing into a strange figure. Half of it was illuminated with Buddhist light, while the other half was filled with demonic aura. The evil Buddha statue's palm descended, and the power of Buddha and demonic interweaved and erupted, directly blasting Lin Mingtong away. Mahavajra form. Chu Xiu had already used the incarnation of the Great Vajra Mountain godly power during the Demon Dao meeting. Thus, he did not mind revealing this technique. Defeating 2 experts under Pang Hu in 2 moves, Chu Xiu's strength was completely revealed. If this had happened elsewhere, the surrounding people would definitely be shocked by Chu Xiu's strength and not dare to make a move. However, these bold bandits who had dared to challenge the Northern Yan dynasty in the past, although they were shocked by Chu Xiu's strength, they were also enraged and wanted to attack Chu Xiu. Hejan and Lin Mutong were their brothers. Now that their brothers were beaten up, what should they do? Even if it was a martial Dao grandmaster in front of them, they only had one thing to do, and that was to attack. But right at this moment, Pang Hu snorted coldly and said, "All of you scram for me. Haven't you embarrassed yourself enough?" Looking at Hejan, who was still standing there in a daze, and Lin Mingtong, who was lying on the ground, Pang Hu lightly snorted, "Are you dead? If you're not dead, then sit back down." Hearing Pang Hu's reprimand, Hejan and Lin Mingtong finally sat back down obediently. However, Hejan's chair had already been crushed by him. Hejan looked around and finally stood beside Lin Mingtong with a downcast expression. Pang Hu stood up and cupped his hands at Chu Xiu and laughed. "Young Master Lin is indeed a young talent of the Yinma clan. Your strength is indeed extraordinary. If Qilian village wants to survive this crisis, we will have to rely on you, young Master Lin." With Pang Hu's eyesight, although Chu Xiu had only made 2 moves, he could still see Chu Xiu's true strength. This was also because Chu Xiu had shown mercy. Otherwise, Lin Mingtong and Hejan would have been seriously injured even if they did not die. Although Pang Hu had no intention of blaming Mei Qinglian, he still doubted whether this kid could be of any help to the Qilian stockade. However, now that he had seen Chu Xiu's strength, Pang Hu no longer had any doubts. Any sect that had such an outstanding disciple would definitely be nurtured as a treasure. His status was even higher than the martial arts masters in the sect. Mei Qinglian had sent the most outstanding young talent of the Yinma clan. She had given him enough face. Chu Xiu casually cupped his hands and said, "Leader Pang, you're too kind. The Saintess has asked me to help you solve the crisis. I will naturally do my best." However, I also need your village's cooperation. Otherwise, I will not be able to turn the situation around by myself. Pang Hu nodded and waved his hand. Set up the banquet. Let's talk while we eat. Qilian village's predecessor was the Northern 36 Bandits. To put it bluntly, the Northern 36 Bandits were bandits. No matter how strong they were, they could not avoid some bandit habits, just like now. A large table was placed in the main hall. More than 10 of Pang Hu's trusted subordinates were present. Eating large pieces of meat and drinking large bowls of wine may have become the Qilian village's habit. However, this was the first time Chu Xiu saw such a scene. It was very novel. Qilian village's way of eating large pieces of meat was no longer considered eating large pieces of meat. It was practically eating whole animals. Chicken and ducks were whole, but there was even a whole roasted mountain tiger. The rest of the delicacies such as bear paws and venison were innumerable. Pang Hu poured a bowl of wine for Chu Xiu and drank it in one gulp. He said in a deep voice, Mr. Lin came all the way to Qilian village to help. Everyone, stand up and show your appreciation. The Qilian village bandits were best at drinking. One by one, they raised their bowls of wine. He Zhan and Lin Mingtong were even more eager. They were defeated by Chu Xiu in one move. Even now, they still felt a little embarrassed. If they can't beat you, they can at least drink, right? However, Chu Xiu only drank one round out of courtesy. He used his inner energy to suppress the alcohol. He put down the bowl and said, Chief Pang, it's time to talk business. Hearing Chu Xiu's words, Pang Hu also put down his bowl. He Zhan and Lin Mingtong could only look at each other gloomily and put down their bowls as well. Chu Xiu said in a deep voice, Qilian village's current crisis is not the situation, but the reason why Qilian village is in such a crisis. First, we have to find the source. Then we can do things. Pang Hu frowned and said, Mr. Lin, what do you mean? Although Pang Hu looked rough and uncouth, he wasn't stupid. In the past, the 36 bandits of the north were all annihilated. Only Pang Hu was left to struggle at death's door. This was not because he was a coward. It was because Pang Hu was more sensitive to danger. That was why he avoided the danger in time and preserved a trace of strength for the 36 bandits of the north. But this time, being forced into such a state by the loyalty-gathering manner, Pang Hu was really at a loss and could not figure out the situation. Chu Xiu paused and said, Chief Pang is recuperating in the dense forest of Liaodong and regaining his strength. He also befriended the 13th prince, Xiang Chong, to relieve the pressure from the imperial court. This is a good move. Hearing Chu Xiu's words, Pang Hu's face showed a hint of pride. Pang Hu originally planned to recuperate and then continue with his old business. However, he met Xiang Chong by accident and befriended him. So, he used Xiang Chong to make the imperial court not pursue him, the surviving member of the 36 bandits of the north. The last time Pang Hu met Xiang Chong, it was after Xiang Chong came to Chu Xiu's aid with the grandmaster of the Yinma clan, Sheng Tianyao, who was an official of the imperial family. So, it could be said that Xiang Chong and Pang Hu's meeting was indirectly facilitated by Chu Xiu. However, at this time, Chu Xiu suddenly said, But Chief Pang, you're going the wrong way. Pang Hu frowned and said, What do you mean? Chu Xiu said in a deep voice, The land of Liaodong is not suitable for development in the first place. After Master Pang recovered your strength, you entrenched yourself around Liaodong County and set up a branch. Although you didn't plunder like the 36 bandits of the northern land in the past, and instead collected the tributes from passing merchants, it still caused some people to be dissatisfied. Pang Hu snorted coldly and said, I've done enough benevolence. My Qilian village may be bandits, but we also abide by the rules. When they pass through Liaodong County, I only need to collect money and I'll guarantee their safety. If they can pay more money, I can even get my brothers to escort them all the way to their destination. Are they still dissatisfied? In fact, Pang Hu learned this trick from Chu Xiu. After Han Bao returned to Qilian village, he naturally talked about how he lived all these years. Among them, his cooperation with Chu Xiu gave Pang Hu a lot of inspiration. Pang Hu was not a stupid person. After the 36 bandits of the north were annihilated, Pang Hu also reflected on why they were annihilated. In the end, Pang Hu came to a conclusion. The 36 bandits of the north were annihilated not because they robbed the imperial court and various martial arts forces, but because they did not abide by the rules, broke the rules, and offended everyone they could offend. That was why they were annihilated together. Therefore, this time, Pang Hu used the method of cooperation between Chu Xiu and Han Bao in Shangmeng Mountain to collect tolls. He did not go overboard. Moreover, Pang Hu also added a bodyguard service. As long as they could afford it, the bandits of Qilian village could even serve as escorts. Chu Xiu shook his head and said, "Chief Pang, you misunderstood me. The dissatisfaction I'm talking about is not the dissatisfaction of the passing merchants, but the dissatisfaction of the Morgue village. It's because you, Chief Pang, are blocking the Morgue village's way." "What do you mean?" Chu Xiu dipped his wine in wine and drew the rough terrain of the northern Yen on the table and said, "Under the development of Nianrenlong, the Morgue village is almost famous in the northern Yen Jianghu. Although it is not strong, it is very famous. Nianrenlong is an expert in managing his reputation. Ordinary people seek profits first, then fame. But Nianrenlong is good at using his reputation to win profits. Now that the Morgue village has accumulated enough fame, Nianrenlong naturally wants to gain some practical benefits. But the Morgue village is known for being benevolent and righteous. How can they attack and destroy a family? Therefore, the simplest way is to create an alliance. The Morgue village will be the leader of the alliance to do something. If it succeeds, as long as Nianrenlong's methods are right, the alliance will not disband and will still serve Nianrenlong as the leader. Now, looking at the Morgue village's actions, it is obvious that their goal is to advance north. And Chief Pang's Qilian village has become the target of the Morgue village's alliance. They must get rid of the stepping stone. Chapter 5:14. Chu Xiu's words shocked and angered everyone present. Qilian Stockade village used to be awe-inspiring in the past. When the 36 bandits of the northern land were still around, they dared to challenge the imperial court of the northern Yen kingdom. Who would have thought that they would be treated as a stepping stone by others now? He Zhan was so angry that he slammed the table and scolded, "Bastards! Those shameless people from the Morgue village said they wanted to exterminate the bandits and restore peace to Liaodong. It turns out that they wanted to expand their power and used Qilian village as an excuse." Chu Xiu said lightly, "There is no such thing as unconditional love and hatred in this world. The Morgue village has never been so benevolent. Otherwise, it would not have developed to where it is now. The moon-worshipping cult is in the West Chu and the evil pole sect is in the northern land. If the Morgue village really wanted to help the people, why didn't they find trouble with the moon-worshipping cult? Wouldn't it be better to find the weaker evil pole sect? In other words, you are all from Qilian village and not the 36 bandits of the northern land. When the 36 bandits of the northern land were at their peak, would the Morgue village dare to find trouble with you?" Everyone present nodded, but Lin Mutong suddenly asked, "Mr. Lin, if the Morgue village wants to develop, why did they choose the northeast direction instead of other places?" Chu Xiu said lightly, "It's simple. Because the Morgue village can't afford to offend people from both sides. In the west, there is the Huangfu clan of Pingyao in western Yen. Although the Huangfu clan is not very strong, they have many trump cards as one of the oldest among the 9 aristocratic families. In the south is the Divine Martial School of southern Yen. Although the Divine Martial School is not strong, Yen Huainan is an outstanding person. The Morgue village doesn't want to offend Yen Huainan. Therefore, as long as the Morgue village has the intention to develop in these two sides, they will fight back. In the northeast direction, Liaodong County is vast but sparsely populated. It is close to East Yen and Qilian Stockade comes from the 36 bandits of the northern land. This in itself is a very good excuse. If I were Nianrenlong, I would also choose this direction as my target." Pang Hu said in a low voice, "Then does young Master Lin have a way to break out of this situation? The Memorial Village has joined forces with more than 10 forces to attack together. In terms of numbers, our Qilian Stockade village can't compare. Nianrenlong is a slippery fellow. Although I have the strength to deal with him, he rarely fights face to face. The northern Yen martial artist, Han Baxian, is Nie Donglio's master. This time, they even invited Han Baxian. When I fought with him, both of us were injured. My injuries were probably more serious. Currently, our Chilean stockade cannot compare to them in terms of high-end combat power and numbers. Hearing that even Han Baxian was involved, Chu Xiu could not help but ask, Nie Donglu is also involved this time. Lin Tong said, of course, and the one who planned to annihilate our Chilean stockade village was Nie Donglu himself. Nie Renlong, his father, spared no effort to build up Nie Donglio's reputation. Even the attack on Chilean village this time, most of the plans were arranged by Nie Donglu. A cold light flashed in Chu Xiu's eyes. This time, he was not only here to help, he was also here to take revenge. Pang Hu's gaze towards Chu Xiu was still a little doubtful. When mentioning the memorial village, why did Lin Yi also look murderous? It seemed that this young talent recommended by Mei Qinglian was really reliable. He had already gotten into character so quickly and stood on the Chilean stockade's side, treating the memorial village as an enemy. Chu Xiu thought for a while and said in a low voice, if we want to break out of this situation, we need 3 steps. Retreat, divide, and take advantage of the situation. However, the world is unpredictable. Even the Taoist divination masters cannot take 1 step at a time and 3 at a time. I can only take 1 step at a time. If there is a problem in the middle, then I can fix it. Everyone present looked at each other. In fact, most of them did not know what Chu Xiu meant. For these guys who used to be bandits, they were usually good at 2 things, killing and robbing. It wasn't that the northern 36 bandits were all idiots, but most of their personalities were just like that. They firmly believed that strength was more important than stratagems. Once their strength reached a certain level, they could ignore any stratagems. Although this was the truth, it was a pity that the 36 bandits of the north were not strong enough before they were annihilated. It was the same for the current Chilean village. Under the premise of insufficient strength, they could only rely on strategy to turn the tables. Pang Hu knocked on the table and said, "You said retreat, what do you mean?" Chu Xiu said lightly, "It means exactly what it means. Temporarily avoid the sharp edge and retreat first. This way we can exchange for a chance of survival." As soon as Chu Xiu said this, everyone present suddenly exploded. He Zhan immediately stood up and said, "Absolutely not. The first master has worked with us for so many years and finally established a foothold in Liaodong County. In the end, you are telling us to give up these foundations and retreat directly. What is this? If admitting defeat could solve the problem, we would have admitted defeat to the morgue long ago. Why would we still invite you here?" Chu Xiu spread his hands and said in an indifferent tone, "Retreating is not admitting defeat. Also, Liaodong is not suitable for development in the first place. The land is vast and the population is sparse. Moreover, we are surrounded by enemies on all sides. The Morgue in the east, the sect of divine powers in the west, the Huangfu family in the south, and the northern floating snow city in the north. Which of these forces has a good impression of the Chilean village? It's fine if no one makes a move now. Once someone makes a move like this, the Chilean village will not even have a place to run. Everyone, I am not from the Chilean village. The Saintess asked me to help. I'm here. I have also come up with the idea. As for whether to use it or not, it is entirely up to you." Pang Hu frowned and thought for a moment. He directly slammed the table and said, "All right, we will do as Mr. Lin says. From now on, the Chilean village will listen to your command. Do not doubt the people you use." Pang Hu was not good at these things. It would be fine if someone was good at it. Of course, Pang Hu did not trust Chu Xiu, but Mei Qinglian. He believed that even if Mei Qinglian did not help him, she would not cheat him. That was why Mei Qinglian sent Chu Xiu at this time. It proved that Chu Xiu definitely had the ability to turn the situation around. Chu Xiu said in a low voice, "If that's the case, then I would like to request Chief Pang to lead your brothers to break up and give up on Chilean village. Everyone will retreat to the extreme north, but do not enter the territory of the northern fluttering snow city. We must maintain an extremely low profile, only then can we proceed with the second and third step. Pang Hu nodded and waved his hand. After the banquet, all the martial artists who belonged to the Qilian village retreated. There were not many people in the entire Qilian village. There were only about 10,000 people. Among them were the elites of the Qilian Iron Cavalry. There were actually less than 1,000 of them. That was why it was extremely easy for them to retreat and hide. At this time, in a manor outside Liaodong County, Nie Renlong and Nie Donglu, as well as more than 10 martial artists in the Unity of Heaven and Men realm were all there. They were also holding a banquet, but it was much more exquisite than the banquet in the Qilian village. Nie Renlong sat in the middle of the main seat. Nie Donglu sat beside him. The people around him were the leaders of some of the martial arts forces in the east of Yen. At this time, they were constantly complimenting Nie Donglu. This time, it is all thanks to the young master's divine strategy. His plan was impeccable. Only then could we completely suppress the bandits and murderers. That's right. According to the young master's plan, we will advance step by step. I reckon it won't take long for us to completely devour the Qilian village. It is the fortune of the Loyalty Village to have such an outstanding person like the young master. It is also the fortune of the east of Yan's martial arts world. Recently, the young master has been accumulating his strength and did not make a name for himself in the martial arts world. That allowed Chu Xiu and Lu Fengxian to enter the top 10 of the Longhu leaderboard. When this matter is over, the young master will definitely enter the top 5 of the Longhu leaderboard. This group of people did not compliment Nie Renlong. Instead, they complimented Nie Donglu. It was not that they were insensible, but they knew that Nie Renlong had already planned to push Nie Donglu out since the Loyalty Village had caused such a huge commotion. As the manor master of the Loyalty Manor, Nie Renlong's personal strength aside, his reputation was big enough. Hence, Nie Renlong no longer needed some empty reputation. On the other hand, Nie Donglu was not even in the top 10 of the Longhu leaderboard. Hence, Nie Renlong had to push him back to the top 10 again. Only then would Nie Donglu be qualified to compete with the young talents. Moreover, Nie Renlong had the intention of testing Nie Donglu in this operation. He only had one son. The future of the Loyalty Village would be handed over to Nie Donglu. Although Nie Donglu had the experience of joining forces to annihilate bandits and murderers in the past, those were only small fights. This time, the Loyalty Village had joined forces with more than 10 major forces in the east of Yen, as well as 2 martial Dao masters, Nie Renlong and Han Baxian. These people were all under Nie Donglio's command. This was a world of difference from before. However, it was worth praising that Nie Donglio's performance this time was really good. Although his performance was not amazing, he was cautious in his plan and fought steadily. He uprooted all the Qilian village's branches and finally forced them into the mountains and forests of Liaodong. The only mistake was the battle between Han Baxian and Crimson Face Heavenly King, Pang Hu. Both of them were injured and Nie Renlong did not even have the chance to launch a sneak attack. In the past, Pang Hu was not the most famous among the 36 northern bandits. However, Hu knew that his strength was so strong that he could actually fight with Han Baxian until both of them were injured. However, it did not matter. Qilian village was already an arrow at the end of its flight. The Loyalty Village could completely destroy it if they attacked together. The reason why the Loyalty Village alliance had not made a move yet was because a forced battle would easily force the other party into a life and death struggle. Although according to Nie Donglio's calculations, the net would not break even if both sides were to die. At most, there would only be a few cracks. However, Nie Donglu was a cautious person. It was better to have as few losses as possible. Nibbling away step by step was the safest way. At this moment, someone from the Loyalty Village suddenly came to report that all the Qilian village members had retreated. This immediately stunned everyone present. Chapter 5:15. Although Qilian village had set Qilian village as their target, they had never underestimated Qilian village. Both Nie Donglu and Nie Renlong were like that. As the only survivor of the 36 bandits in the north, Qilian Village's ability was not weak. That was why they had set up a banquet here to celebrate their temporary advantage. Who would have thought that the people of Qilian Village would take the initiative to escape? Everyone present looked at each other. They were all prepared for the next few fierce battles, but who would have thought that they would win so easily this time? They were stunned for a moment. At this time, a middle-aged martial arts practitioner in a black brocade robe suddenly stood up and said with a smile, "Manor Master, young Manor Master, since Qilian Village has escaped, does this mean that we can take over Liaodong County's territory?" Nie Donglu frowned slightly, feeling a little unhappy. These guys were really useless. They had just gotten a little bit of benefit and they were already prepared to share it. The reason why Qilian Village could form this so-called alliance was because of its reputation. As for the other reason, it was because of benefits. Qilian Village promised that as long as the territory was conquered, they would not take any of it. All of it would be given to these forces. Of course, the premise was that these forces would not leave the alliance. This was also Nie Renlong's cleverness. Qilian Village would always be the one that opened the door for the people in the pugilistic world. Invading and conquering other territories was not done by Qilian Village but by other forces in the alliance. If the bad reputation was carried by these forces, it would not harm Qilian Village's reputation. Moreover, once Qilian Village needed it, the alliance would immediately gather. This way they would have face. Why not? Hence, this warrior's request was not wrong. However, he seemed to be a little too eager. This made Nie Donglu feel a little unhappy. Nie Renlong smiled and said, "Don't worry, Miao family head. What belongs to you will definitely be yours. I'll send someone to investigate later. If those people from Qilian Stockade Village have really withdrawn from Liaodong County, we'll start to discuss how to distribute the territories." The Miao family head, Miao Chunmao, belonged to a Miao family that did not have a strong foundation in the east of Yen. The reason why the Miao family was able to rise was because of Miao Chunmao, an expert at the unity of the world realm. Therefore, Miao Chunmao couldn't wait to divide the territory and strengthen the Miao family. Upon hearing Nie Renlong's words, Miao Chunmao smiled and cupped his hands together. "Manor Lord, please don't blame me. I was a little too impatient." Nie Renlong waved his hand and said, "It doesn't matter, it's just human nature." After sending the others away, Nie Donglu snorted coldly and said, "This group of people is really impatient. We haven't completely annihilated the Qilian Stockade and they're already thinking of getting a share of the benefits." Nie Renlong said indifferently, "Everyone in the world values benefits. If there are no benefits, who would still work for you? Donglu, remember, the best people to make use of in this world are actually those who have desires in their hearts. Conversely, those who truly have no desires are the most difficult to deal with." Nie Donglu said in a deep voice, "Yes, I understand." However, Nie Donglu paused and said, "Father, what's going on with the Qilian Stockade? Why did they suddenly retreat? I have investigated. Pang Hu is not someone who is afraid of death. I was even afraid that if he forced Qilian Stockade Village into a corner, the other party would fight to the death. Why did Pang Hu suddenly retreat? Could there be a trap in this?" Nie Renlong stroked his beard and thought for a moment before saying, "People's hearts can change." After experiencing the destruction of the 36 bandits of the northern lands, the current Pang Hu is no longer the Pang Hu of the Qilian Iron Cavalry of the past. Moreover, Pang Hu should have noticed the difference in strength between the two sides. Even if he doesn't think for himself, he has to think for the other Qilian Stockade warriors. There's no benefit for him to fight the Loyalty Villa alliance to the end. So it's normal for him to retreat now. However, even if there's a trap, it doesn't matter. Anyway, we've waited for so long. A few more days won't make a difference. Send someone to the Liaodong forest to investigate clearly, then we'll make our move." Nie Donglu nodded and said, "All right, I'll ask someone to do it now." When the people from the Righteous Manor investigated the Qilian Stockade Village in the dense forest of Liaodong, they found that it was indeed deserted. This made the martial arts forces in East Yen suddenly look wild with joy. The Loyalty Villa had already promised that they did not want all the territories in Liaodong County. All of them belonged to the other martial arts forces in the alliance. The leaders of these martial arts forces were not idiots. The loyalty villa was smart, but they were not stupid either. Naturally, they knew what the loyalty villa was thinking. However, it wasn't a bad thing for them to stay in the Loyalty Manor alliance. It was good to lean on a big tree. In the past, these forces were naturally not weak, but they could not be compared to the top martial arts forces like the Shenwu sect and the Huangfu clan. But now, if they stayed in the Loyalty Villa alliance, they would have some confidence when they faced these top martial arts forces again. At this time, in a restaurant in a state capital of Liaodong County, Chu Xiu, He Zhan, Lin Mutong, Han Bao and more than 10 elite Qilian stockade warriors gathered together. Han Bao reported to Chu Xiu the information he had recently investigated. Pang, who had already led most of the Qilian stockade warriors to hide in the north, avoiding the tracking of the Loyalty Villa. As for He Zhan and the other elite Qilian stockade warriors, they were ordered by Pang Hu to listen to Chu Xiu's orders. After Han Bao finished explaining the situation, He Zhan snorted coldly, "Now, as you wish, Qilian stockade has already given up our family's foundation. We are being chased like stray dogs. What do you think we should do now?" Chu Xiu did not care about He Zhan's tone. He only said faintly, "The higher we stand, the harder we fall. Let this group of people be happy for now. When the time comes, they will naturally cry." Since the concession was successful and the Loyalty Villa did not suspect anything, then we should move on to the next step, which is division. Although a group like the Morgue Manor Alliance seems to be strong, any alliance is actually scattered. Everyone is united because of benefits or some kind of goal. But in the end, everyone is selfish. Their priority is still themselves. As he said this, Chu Xiu took out a stack of information and said, "This is the information of those forces that joined the Loyalty Villa alliance. We don't need a lot of them. We only need to pick one to divide and make use of it. That will do." Lin Mutong frowned and said, "Temptation or what?" Chu Xiu took a look at the forest passage and said, "Based on Qilian Stockade's current state, what can we use to tempt them? Even an idiot would know that at this time, they will definitely stand on the Loyalty Villa Alliance's side. Of course, we have to threaten them. Among these forces, the one with the biggest loophole is the Miao family of Yendong. The Miao family itself is not strong and their foundation is very weak. It is only because of Miao Chun Mao, a great master in the oneness of heaven and men's state, that they rose. In the Loyalty Villa Alliance, most of the forces were personally invited by Nieren Long. Only Miao Chun Mao joined on his own initiative. This person is so enthusiastic about this matter because he wants to occupy a foundation in Liaodong County so that the Miao family can have more foundation to rise. This kind of person is the easiest to deal with. His family is his sore point. Seize his whole family and make use of them. If they are disobedient, let his whole family die. Simple and direct. Hearing Chu Xiu's words, everyone at the scene suddenly shivered. It was not because of Chu Xiu's words about killing the whole family, but because of Chu Xiu's tone when he said such words. The Qilian Stockade bandits were not good people, especially when they were the 36 bandits of the northern land. They had killed many people. However, they had only killed for the sake of plundering, unlike the current Chu Xiu. He had used an unusually calm tone to say such words, as if killing an entire family was as simple as eating and drinking. Seeing this, they couldn't help but feel a chill in their hearts. No wonder Lin Yi was the most outstanding disciple of the younger generation of the Devil Path. His heart was truly vicious and ruthless. At this time, they finally understood why the righteous sects clamored to eliminate the diabolism and defend the Tao. It was not because they had nothing better to do, but because this group of people from the diabolism was really King terrifying. However, at this time, Lin Mutong said with some hesitation, "Master Lin, what if that Miao Chun Mao does not care about his own family and snitches? If we do this, wouldn't it be a little against the rules of the Jianghu? After all, we shouldn't implicate family members." Chu Xiu glanced at Lin Mutong in surprise. This group of people from the 36 bandits of the northern land were actually so pedantic. They still cared about the rules of the Jianghu? Chu Xiu said lightly, The saying that you shouldn't implicate family members is a joke. Your family enjoys the benefits that you snatch, but when someone seeks revenge, you say that you shouldn't implicate family members. Isn't that a joke? I am from the diabolism. You all know the reputation of the Inma clan, so I don't care about the rules. If you are worried about your reputation, then we can forget about this matter. Hearing this, Lin Mutong hurriedly said, "No problem, we will do as Master Lin said." Right now, the great master had said that everything must be done according to Master Lin's instructions. In the end, if there were any problems because of his suggestion, he would not be able to bear the responsibility. Chu Xiu narrowed his eyes and said, "In that case, everyone, follow me to the east of Yen first." Everyone present looked at each other and nodded. However, at this time, the way they looked at Chu Xiu was a little different. This group of people who used to be bandits were not good people to begin with. They were very vicious, so they did not take Chu Xiu seriously at the beginning. Even when He Zhan was defeated by Chu Xiu in one move, he was still a little unconvinced. However, when Chu Xiu revealed his plan just now, everyone realized that the vicious that they, as bandits, understood could not be compared to Lin Yi. Chapter 516. 10 years ago, the Miao family in Lini, East Yen was still a very weak family. They were not bullied all day long, but at least in the whole East Yen, they were not ranked. Only in recent years, when Miao Chunmao stepped into the unity of heaven and human beings realm, did the Miao family feel better. Although in the eyes of the real top gurus, the integration of heaven and human beings could only be said to be not bad, in East Yen, the integration of heaven and human beings was enough to be called a master. Therefore, the Miao family could be considered to have really risen. At night, the Miao family's mansion was brightly lit. The whole Miao family had been holding a banquet to celebrate the real rise of the Miao family in recent days. Miao Chunmao had sent them a message, asking them to prepare to move the Miao family to Liaodong County. The martial arts forces in the East Yen were not weak, and the division of forces had been very perfect. Therefore, if the Miao family wanted to rise in the East Yen, they had to compete with others. The decline of a force could represent the rise of another force. However, except for Miao Chunmao, the strength of the Miao family was too weak to compete at all. Therefore, Miao Chunmao could only think of another way to take the initiative to join the Righteous Manor Alliance, lay a foundation in Liaodong and then move the family there. In this way, the Miao family could really develop. At this time, Chu Xiu came to the gate of the Miao family with He Zhan and the others, but they were surprised to find that there was not even a guard in the whole Miao family. Chu Xiu and the others looked at each other. Was the Miao family too happy or too arrogant? How could the defense be so lax? Of course, it did not matter even if there was a defense. Anyway, in the eyes of the warriors in the unity of heaven and human beings realm, it was nothing. When the door was opened, some servants along the way wanted to scold Chu Xiu when they saw him. However, Chu Xiu looked at them and used his powerful spiritual force to directly freeze them there, making them unable to say a word. It was not until Chu Xiu pushed open the inner door of the lobby that the people of the Miao family found Chu Xiu. They were stunned for a long time, and then a middle-aged man with a flushed face came out. He walked towards Chu Xiu and shouted angrily, "Who are you? Trespassing into my Miao family, are you tired of living?" However, before he could reach Chu Xiu's eyes shone with a dim light. In an instant, a powerful spiritual power surged into the middle-aged man's head. Bang! Like a watermelon bursting, red and white juice splashed everywhere. Everyone present was about to cry out in surprise, but an extremely terrifying demonic aura was released from Chu Xiu's body. The cold and deep aura immediately suppressed everyone's cries of surprise. Chu Xiu put a finger in front of his face and made a shushing gesture. "Shu, don't talk. If you make any more noise, you'll die." The warriors of the Miao family immediately fell silent. They covered their mouths and didn't dare to make a sound. At this time, Chu Xiu wore an expressionless black iron mask. The demonic aura around him was monstrous. Coupled with the horrible corpse on the ground, he was just like those horrible demons who ate human blood and drank human blood in the legends. Who is Miao Chuanmao's son? Chu Xiu asked. No one present answered. If you don't tell me, I'll start killing them one by one. Chu Xiu said this in a calm tone, but it made everyone present tremble at the same time. They immediately pointed out a young man. Looking at the trembling young man, Chu Xiu said lightly, Don't worry, I won't kill you. Your life or death depends on your father. Now write a letter to your father and ask him to go back to Yendong. As long as your father makes the right choice, you don't have to die. Looking at the trembling young man writing the letter, He Zhan and Lin Mutong looked at each other. Was it really that simple? It seemed that it was really that simple. At this time, Miao Chunmao was still in Liaodong. But it was very easy for him to go back to Yendong. Pang Hu led the people of Qilian Stockade Village and split up. Although the Loyalty Manor Alliance was still searching for them, Pang Hu and the others deliberately kept a low profile, so the Loyalty Manor Alliance had little effect. Different from the other aristocratic families who brought a large number of people to join the alliance, because the Miao family was too weak, only Miao Chunmao came to join the Loyalty Manor Alliance. In this kind of search, his effect was limited, so Miao Chunmao was very free during this period. After receiving the news from his family, Miao Chunmao didn't feel anything unusual. He thought that the Miao family was ready to move to Liaodong. So Miao Chunmao went straight back to the Miao family. When he opened the door of the Miao family, he felt something was wrong. Miao Chunmao was now the pillar of the entire Miao family. Now that he was back, the Miao family should have someone to welcome him. Why was there not even a shadow? However, Miao Chunmao still subconsciously pushed open the Miao family's door. What he saw was a group of people from the Miao family. Although they were not tied up, their faces were pale. There was also Chu Xiu and the others who had moved chairs over and sat in the middle. Miao Chunmao's first reaction was to run. But before he could move, Chu Xiu said lightly, If you run, I will kill your whole family. If you stay, you still have a chance to live. Miao Chunmao's movement froze. He turned around and closed the door. He shouted at Chu Xiu in a low voice, You are from Qilian Stockade Village? Family should not be involved. Qilian Stockade Village ignored the rules of Jianghu. Do you really not care about anything? The Miao family was considered low profile in the past. Other than Qilian Stockade Village, Miao Chunmao really could not think of anyone else who would do such a thing. Moreover, Miao Chunmao had never thought that Qilian Stockade Village would do such a thing. It was not that Miao Chunmao was naive. It was because even when Qilian Stockade Village was one of the 36 bandits of the north, they only robbed the imperial court and some big sex caravans. Qilian Stockade Village had never done such a despicable thing like using family members to threaten others. Moreover, Miao Chunmao subconsciously thought that even if Qilian Stockade Village wanted revenge, it would definitely be against the Memorial Villa. How could his small Miao family be noticed by the other party? Chu Xiu said lightly, Jianghu rules? Qilian Stockade Village was almost forced to death by your Memorial Villa alliance. Why would they care about Jianghu rules? There has never been a rule in Jianghu that only you can kill my whole family, but I cannot kill your whole family. Miao Chunmao's face showed a trace of bitterness. He said dejectedly, Everyone, Miao Chunmao, admit defeat. You can kill me if you want, but please leave a trace of my Miao family's bloodline. Moreover, even if you really want to wipe out my Miao family, other than being able to vent your anger, there is not much meaning. It was the Memorial Villa who wanted to wipe you out, not my Miao family. Even if I die, the result will be the same. If Miao Chunmao was a heartless person, he could have just left and told Nie Renlong about this. He would have cried and complained that he had made such a great contribution to the alliance, but in the end, he was implicated and his whole family was killed. Regardless of whether Nie Renlong was a hypocrite, even if it was just for his reputation, he had to treat Miao Chunmao, who had sacrificed so much for the alliance, well. It was a pity that Miao Chunmao was not a heartless person. He could not let go of his family, his wife and children. Chu Xiu said lightly, Of course, I know that killing you or your whole family will not solve anything. Otherwise, do you think you can still stand here alive? I will give you a chance to not die. What chance? Miao Chunmao asked. Chu Xiu narrowed his eyes and said, It's very simple. Stand on my side and lie in ambush at the memorial villa. Do whatever I tell you to do. Miao Chuanmao's expression suddenly changed and he said quickly, "You are sending me to my death again. Moreover, if I really become a spy, it is equivalent to offending the entire memorial villa. There will be no place for me in the entire northern Yen." Miao Chunmao was considered a veteran in the Eastern Yen martial arts world. He had personally seen how the memorial villa had risen, so he was very clear about what kind of person Nie Renlong was. If he betrayed Nie Renlong, he would definitely end up very, very badly. Chu Xiu said coldly, "If there is no place for you in the northern Yen, then go to Eastern Qi or Western Chu. The world is so big, do you think there is no place for you? This is a single-choice question. You have no choice. If you become a spy, you may die, but your family can live. If you don't, I will send you and your whole family to hell. You should know which one to choose." Cold sweat appeared on Miao Chuanmao's forehead. In the end, Miao Chunmao had no choice but to agree. If he agreed, he would die in the future. If he didn't, he would die right now. So it was very easy to choose. Chu Xiu stood up and said, "Don't even think about telling Nie Renlong about this and asking him to come and save your family. I'll arrange for people to stay here. Once the situation changes, they'll at least take your family down with them. Killing people is always faster than saving people, even if the other party is a martial Dao grandmaster. Besides, the next task I will give you is not difficult. You only need to use words to provoke those people in the martial arts world of Eastern Yen to go to the extreme north. It will be best if you can get into conflict with some of the martial arts world forces in the extreme north. Remember, the bigger the conflict, the better." Miao Chunmao was not stupid. He immediately knew what Chu Xiu was planning. He looked at Chu Xiu with a hint of surprise. This guy, he obviously wanted to make things worse. Chu Xiu looked back at Lin Mutong and the others and said, "The division has been successful, so it is time for the last step. This step will take a little longer. Lin Mutong, take some people to guard here. If something goes wrong, immediately slaughter the Miao family. Hejan Han Bao, follow me back to Liaodong Prefecture." Among Pang Hu's men, Lin Mutong was the more rational one. Chu Xiu could rest assured leaving this place to him. As for Hejan, he was impulsive and easily angered. Although he was loyal to Pang Hu, he could easily ruin things. It was better to keep him by his side and only be responsible for the fighting. Chapter 517. The north of the country of Yen was the most desolate place in the entire northern Yen. It was even more sparsely populated than Liaodong County. Although its area was several times the size of Liaodong County, it was still collectively known as the North. There were no counties or counties. Further north of the northern lands was the Northern Drifting Snow City. The entire northern lands was considered as the sphere of influence of the Northern Drifting Snow City. As for the places further north of the Northern Drifting Snow City, they were basically desolate and uninhabited. Only a force like the Great Guangming Temple would establish their sect in such a place, and in the name of tempering their will. At this moment, in a small town in the north of the country of Yen, a disguised Pang Hu was drinking with Chu Xiu. Pang Hu frowned and said, "Mr. Lin, you asked the Qilian Stockade to retreat. We have already retreated. You said you wanted to break up the Morgue Village Alliance, but in the end, you only instigated a small character. Now at the last step, you said you want to borrow power. Whose power do you want to borrow? During this period of time, the Qilian Stockade was scattered, but the Morgue Village still managed to capture some of our brothers. There were more than 100 casualties. The Qilian Stockade does not have much time to wait." Chu Xiu poured a cup of wine for Pang Hu and said faintly, "Don't be anxious, Chief Pang. Haste makes waste. This time, I not only want to save the Qilian Stockade, I also want to severely damage the Morgue Village. As for the layout, of course, we need to be more cautious. As for whose power do I want to borrow, it's very simple. Since I have lured the Morgue Village to the north, naturally I want to borrow the power of the Northern Floating Snow City." Pang Hu was not an idiot. He immediately understood what Chu Xiu meant. However, Pang Hu frowned and said, You want to sow discord between the Morgue village and the northern floating snow city? But Nie Renlong is not an idiot. Nie Donglu, that little bastard, is also very shrewd. They will not fall into the trap. The Morgue village should know that their main goal now is to occupy Liaodong County and annihilate the Qilian Stockade. It is not wise to provoke the northern floating snow city at this time. Chu Xiu narrowed his eyes and said, Nie Renlong and Nie Donglu are indeed not idiots, but they can't resist the temptation of greed. The higher they stood, the harder they fell. The dozens of forces in the Loyalty Village Alliance took over Liaodong County without bloodshed. Didn't they want to go further? Since ancient times, the alliance had always collapsed internally. Otherwise, why would I let Miao Chunmao be a spy? At that time, if one faction took advantage of the situation, how could the other faction sit still? How could the Morgue stop them? I know this group of people very well. When you let them profit, they will support you. But when you stop them from profiting, they will not be so obedient. Pang Hu took a deep look at Chu Xiu. Were all these fellows from the demonic path so sinister? But from Pang Hu's point of view, these fellows from the righteous path were not easy to deal with. Otherwise, why would the Kunlun devil cult lose so badly? Gulping down the wine in his cup, Pang Hu said in a deep voice, "Then I'll wait for a while longer. I hope that you won't disappoint me. I believe in Mei Qinglian. The person she recommended shouldn't be wrong." Chu Xiu said lightly, "Don't worry, Commander Pang. You can use this time to recover from your injuries. At the last moment, there will still be a fierce battle." Pang Hu snorted, "Last time, I did not expect the one who attacked was not that hypocrite Nie Renlong, but Han Baxin. I was seriously injured because of a moment of carelessness. I will not make this mistake again." With that, Pang Hu turned and left, leaving Chu Xiu to pour himself a cup of wine and drink by himself. Looking out the window at the snowy scenery, Chu Xiu's eyes were even colder than the wind and snow of the northern lands. The enemy was in the light while he was in the dark. This time, as long as there were no accidents, Nie Donglu would not be able to escape. At this time, Nie Donglu, who was far away in Liaodong, suddenly felt a chill around his body, as if he was being targeted by something terrifying. Nie Donglu shook his head to get rid of this feeling. At this time, someone from the Morgue delivered some information. At first, Nie Donglu thought that some force had found more warriors from Qilian village and killed them to claim credit. However, after reading the contents, Nie Donglu was so angry that he tore the information into shreds. Nie Donglu was so angry that he tore it up. These idiots! The information said that the forces in the alliance had attacked without permission, using the Qilian village bandits as an excuse to attack some forces in the north. Liaodong County is such a big territory, but it's not enough for them to digest. These idiots actually went to the north to cause trouble. What are they trying to do? Nie Donglu waved his hand and said, "Go, find me the leaders of those families who did not follow the rules." A few days later, the heads of the 6 forces came to Nie Donglio's place. Among them was Miao Chunmao. In fact, this matter was instigated by Miao Chunmao from the beginning. Chu Xiu only gave Miao Chunmao one mission, and that was to instigate the other martial arts forces to attack the north. In fact, Miao Chunmao did not need to instigate them. The leaders of the other forces were already tempted. The north was not the territory of the fluttering snow city. So what if they occupied some of it? Now that they were not alone, they were with the Morgue. Why would they be afraid of the fluttering snow city? With this mentality, this group of people was provoked by Miao Chunmao and started to act first and report later. Even they themselves did not realize that Miao Chunmao was provoking them. Nie Donglu looked at the 6 people in front of him and said with a gloomy expression, "Who allowed you to invade the north? Do you know that this will anger the fluttering snow city?" Everyone present looked at each other, and one of them said hesitantly, "Young master, it's not necessary, right? The north is so big, can the fluttering snow city control all of it?" Nie Donglu snorted coldly and said, "It's better to be safe than sorry. If the fluttering snow city finds out about this, it will definitely cause a misunderstanding. Our current target is not the fluttering snow city, So why bother making things difficult for them? This matter will be dropped for now. But from now on, you can no longer act first and report later, and cross the border to the north. Although in terms of status, Nie Donglu was much higher than the heads of the families present, in terms of seniority, he was still a junior in the pugilistic world. Nie Donglu also had to protect his own reputation, so it was not appropriate for him to start reprimanding the heads of the families now. He could only remind them. Although the people present agreed verbally, they did not take it seriously in their hearts. Back then, they were willing to join the Loyalty Manor Alliance because they wanted to find a backer and not worry about being swallowed up by it. Now, they were considered people of the Loyalty Manor Alliance, but in the end, Nie Donglu told them not to provoke the fluttering Snow City. No matter how they looked at it, this action seemed a little cowardly, and this made the people present somewhat unhappy. After they left, the people present looked at each other, and someone asked, "Since the young master has given the order, then we can only stop?" Miao Chunmao chuckled and said, "Everyone, I don't care if you want to stop, but I won't stop. My Miao family has a weak foundation, different from you. This time, I took the risk to join the Loyalty Manor Alliance, because I want to fight for a future for my Miao family, or else why would I fight to the death with the Chilean stronghold? Now that the benefits are right in front of me, how can I just let it go? The young master is a little too cautious, the north is so big, how can the fluttering Snow City control all of it? Moreover, why did we join the Loyalty Manor Alliance? To put it bluntly, first, it's for benefits, and second, it's to find a backer. If the Loyalty Manor Alliance can't even deal with the fluttering Snow City, then what's the point of our alliance existing? Why don't we just disband?" After saying that, Miao Chunmao directly turned around and left, but at this moment, a trace of cold sweat seeped out of his forehead. These words were what Chu Xiu asked him to say, but if these words were heard by Nie Donglu, he would probably be in trouble. Now, Miao Chunmao could only gamble that among these people, there was no one who was loyal to the Loyalty Manor Alliance. In fact, Miao Chunmao's gamble was right. The remaining 5 people's expressions were also uncertain. No one knew what they were thinking. If all 6 of them were to stop, then this matter would be over. But Miao Chunmao still wanted to do it. If they did not do it, then wouldn't they just be watching others reap the benefits? So the rest of them gritted their teeth and prepared to continue, but this time, they had to be more careful lest they were discovered by the Loyalty Manor Alliance. Anyway, the law did not punish the masses, and they were not the subordinates of the Loyalty Manor Alliance, but the Alliance. Even if they were discovered, there probably would not be any punishment. As a result, under Miao Chunmao's instigation, almost half of the forces in the Morgue Village Alliance secretly invaded the territories in the north and had many conflicts with the local martial arts forces. However, they were all suppressed by their joint forces and did not spread to Nie Donglu. After all, the Loyalty Manor Alliance was now treating them as allies, so it was not easy to investigate, so as long as these people wanted to keep a low profile, it was not a problem for them to temporarily hide. But it was not a problem here, but the news had already spread to the fluttering Snow City in the north. The far north's Snowfall City stood in the center of the northern lands. It was a huge city that was thousands of feet tall, completely constructed from ice and snow. Its entire body was pure white and transparent, and only the words Snowfall City were written in bold, blood-red letters on the city gates. The fluttering Snow City in the north was the private city of the Bai family, and it was not open to the public. In the entire fluttering Snow City, only the people of the Bai family and the servants belonged to the Bai family lived. Perhaps it was related to the local climate. In the fluttering Snow City in the north, whether it was the Bai family or the other servants, they were extremely martial. Some of the younger generation warriors did not even need the elders to supervise their cultivation. They would fight and kill by themselves, and even when they were a little older, they would take the initiative to go to the northern wilderness to hunt all kinds of wild beasts. At this time, in the fluttering Snow City in the north, in the city lord's mansion, a majestic and burly middle-aged man wearing a white tiger skin robe sat on the main seat. There were several warriors below him, crying about something. The middle-aged man's expression became more and more unsightly. Finally, the middle-aged man directly slammed the table and shouted angrily, "Loyalty Manor! You have gone too far. Chapter 5:18. The middle-aged man who slammed the table had a pair of azure blue eyes that were very magnificent and strange. This was a manifestation of the Bai clan's ice soul divine eyes that had been cultivated to the great success stage. In the entire drifting snow city of the Bai clan, there were only a few who had such a cultivation base. This man was the current city lord of the drifting snow city and also the clan leader of the Bai clan, Flaming Sunfrost, Bai Hantian. At this time, the martial artist who was complaining to him was from some of the martial arts forces in the north. Under the instigation of Miao Chunmao, the forces under the Morgue Village Alliance had invaded their territory and resources. The martial arts forces in the north were actually not too weak. It was just that the entire north was too sparsely populated. Therefore, the number of martial arts forces in the area was also very small. Moreover, the distance between the forces was too large. The closer they were to the periphery, the weaker they were. The drifting snow city of the far north did not have a subordinate relationship with these sections. However, the entire north was the territory of the drifting snow city of the far north. If it was a dispute between some small forces, it would be fine. However, this group of people came in the name of the Morgue Village. Wasn't this a provocation to the drifting snow city of the far north? However, the drifting snow city of the far north and the Morgue Village were both major forces in the northern Yen land. Once a war broke out, the consequences would be unimaginable. Therefore, it was better for Bai Hantian to be cautious. He comforted the people from the small forces. Everyone, don't worry. The north is the sphere of influence of the drifting snow city of the far north. The Morgue Village has broken the rules here. I will naturally seek an explanation from them and give everyone justice. Hearing Bai Hantian's words, the people present could only nod and leave. At this time, the door of the inner hall was pushed open. Bai Jianghu and Bai Wuji, the martial artists of the unity of heaven and man realm of the Bai clan, walked in together. Bai Wuji had not stepped into the martial arts world for a long time. However, at this time, he had already reached the Five Qis origin realm. Moreover, the arrogance from before had completely disappeared. His expression actually became a lot calmer. In the past, during the Divine Weapon Convention, Bai Wuji was severely injured by Shin Bai of the Azure Water Sword sect. That sword not only injured Bai Wuji's body, but also his state of mind. However, it was a blessing in disguise. Without that sword, Bai Wuji would have looked down on all the geniuses in the world. From then on, Bai Wuji began to work hard in closed-door seclusion. He no longer interacted with those scoundrel friends of his. Other than seclusion in the northern Driftsnow city, he would go to the northern wastelands to cultivate, tempering his body and will. This was why his cultivation base had advanced by leaps and bounds, and he had even broken through the 3 flowers as well as the 5 Qis collecting in Origin Realm. Father, what do those people from those powers want to do? Are you here to take advantage of me again? Bai Wuji didn't have a good impression of the major powers in the northern lands. In the past, these powers would often use the excuse of coming to the northern Driftsnow city to pay tribute to them, but in reality, these treasures had no value at all. As one of the major sects in the northern lands, the Driftsnow city naturally couldn't just accept the gifts and not return the gifts. Hence, it was always the Driftsnow city that was on the losing end. With regards to this point, the Driftsnow city of the extreme north didn't express anything. In any case, they were a big city and didn't care about such minor things. They only needed the absolute respect of these sects and powers. However, Bai Wuji's character was somewhat domineering. In his opinion, the Driftsnow city of the extreme north was powerful, so why should they be nice to those powers? If they were not convinced, they could just beat them until they were convinced. Bai Hantian shook his head with a gloomy face and said, "It has nothing to do with them. It's the morgue." As he spoke, Bai Hantian told the story to Bai Jianghu and Bai Wuji. Hearing this, Bai Wuji said coldly, "The morgue has been developing well these years. It seems that they are also very arrogant. How dare they try to wrestle with the Driftsnow city of the extreme north?" Although Bai Jianghu seemed to be impulsive and reckless, he was much calmer than Bai Wuji. Hearing this, Bai Jianghu said in a deep voice, "Master, this matter needs to be treated with caution. After all, it was only the forces of the Morgue Alliance that took action, but the Morgue did not do it themselves. Nie Renlong is shrewd and cunning. They are still pursuing the people of Qilian village. It doesn't seem like Nie Renlong would provoke the Drifts Now city of the extreme north at this time." Bai Wuji snorted coldly and said, "Whether it was Nie Renlong's idea or not, it was done by the people of the Morgue. If it wasn't for the Morgue supporting them, would these small forces dare to provoke the Drifts Now city of the extreme north?" Bai Hantian didn't reply. He just pondered with a gloomy face. At this moment, a servant suddenly came to report that someone wanted to see Bai Hantian. Bai Hantian frowned and said, "Who is that?" The servant hesitated for a moment and said, "That person claims to be from the Inma clan, and his strength is not weak." Of course, Bai Hantian, the city lord of the Drifts Now city of the extreme north, was not someone who could meet just anyone. If Chu Xiu wanted to meet Bai Hantian, under the premise that he could not use his own identity, the identity of the Inma clan was the most useful. Bai Hantian frowned and said, "The Inma clan." As the clan master of the Drifts Now city, Bai Hantian naturally knew the difference between the Inma clan and the Bright Demon clan. But because of this, he was surprised that the Inma clan would look for him. In fact, the Drifts Now city of the extreme north was different from the Great Light Temple, which viewed the Demon clan as their mortal enemy. They could not be considered as a pure righteous clan. For the Drifts Now city of the extreme north, when dealing with a force, they would not first care whether the force was righteous or demonic. They would first see if the force had the strength to bring benefits to the Drifts Now city of the extreme north. Bai Hantian knew that the majority of the Inma clan members were extreme lunatics. He did not want to deal with the Inma clan. But now that they had taken the initiative to come to him, if he still refused to meet them, he would really offend them. "Bring him in," Bai Hantian said in a deep voice. After a while, Chu Xiu followed the people of the Bai clan into the main hall. He cupped his hands towards Bai Hantian and said, "Greetings, City Lord Bai." Bai Hantian's eyes shone with a brilliant blue light as he suddenly looked at Chu Xiu. But at the same time, Chu Xiu's mental demon rotation technique was displayed to the extreme. Combined with the power of the soul-shifting technique of extinguishing heaven and extinguishing earth, his powerful mental strength turned into a deep whirlpool, directly strangling the power of Bai Hantian's Ice Soul Divine Eyes. The cultivation methods of the Drifts Now city of the extreme north were very strange. Their cultivation methods mainly focused on close combat, and their martial arts were violent and ferocious. But who would have imagined that the Bai clan's secret cultivation technique would actually contain a spiritual secret technique like the Ice Soul Divine Eyes? This also caused many people to suspect that the Ice Soul Divine Eyes wasn't a cultivation technique of the Bai clan at all, and they had obtained it from somewhere else. As there was only one mental secret technique, the Bai clan of the Drifting Snow City in the far north would naturally not treat it as their main cultivation technique. Therefore, when it came to the strength of mental energy, although Bai Hantian was a martial Dao grandmaster, he was still no match for the current Chu Xiu. Retracting his mental strength, Chu Xiu laughed in a hoarse voice and said, "The Ice Soul Divine Eyes really lives up to its name. But I'm still a guest. City Lord Bai, are you using the Ice Soul Divine Eyes to entertain your guests?" Bai Hantian said coldly, "Although the Drifts Now city of the extreme north is hospitable, guests must also abide by the rules. Wearing a mask, disguising your aura, and coming in secretly is not the way of a guest." Chu Xiu cupped his hands in obeisance and said, "City Lord Bai, please forgive me. It's just that my identity is sensitive and I don't want to expose it. If I were to remove my mask today, there would be no point in talking between us." Bai Hantian snorted coldly but did not say anything else. People of Bai Hantian's status were well aware of the affairs of the Inma clan. He also knew that there were many members of the Inma clan lying in ambush in the Jianghu. During the day, these people might be heroes of the righteous path or disciples of the major sects, but at night, they would become remnants of the diabolism. Many people in the Jianghu knew about these matters, but not many people would investigate wantonly because it was not worth it. The members of the Inma clan were too well hidden. Even if they were to investigate wantonly, they might not be able to find them. If this group of people wanted to hide, then let them. After all, it would be difficult to achieve anything with their little tricks in the dark. As long as the diabolism did not produce another Dugu Weiwei, then this group of rats in the dark would not be able to stir up any waves. There was only one Dugu Weiwei in the Jianghu for thousands of years. How could there be another one so easily? The tides of the world were rising and falling. Now was not the time for this group of people from the diabolism to show their faces. Therefore, Bai Hantian only snorted coldly and did not force Chu Xiu to reveal his true face. He asked coldly, "The Inma clan and I mind our own business. Why are you looking for me?" Chu Xiu cupped his hands and said, "To tell you the truth, I am not actually representing the Inma clan. I am here on behalf of the Qilian Stockade." There was a strange look in Bai Hantian's eyes as he said, "Qilian Stockade? The Qilian Stockade is actually colluding with the Inma clan? If this is the case, you should leave as soon as possible. My northern fluttering snow city has a grudge with the Qilian Stockade. Moreover, the Qilian Stockade is about to be strangled by the Morgue village. What else is there to talk about?" In the past, the Northern Yen Imperial Court had united with the Northern Yen Martial Arts World to kill the Northern 36 bandits. Among them, the Northern Fluttering Snow City had contributed the most. Who asked the Northern Fluttering Snow City to be located in the Northern Lands? Therefore, strictly speaking, the Northern Fluttering Snow City and the Qilian Stockade also had a grudge. Chu Xiu said lightly, "The grudge is already in the past. Even the Qilian Stockade is no longer in their hearts. What are you so conflicted about, Governor Bai? And this time, I am not only here for the Qilian Stockade. The Morgue village is currently in the limelight. As far as I know, they are not only satisfied with occupying Liaodong County and destroying the Qilian Stockade. I am afraid that even the northern lands is their target." Bai Hantian squinted at Chu Xiu and said, "It seems that there are some things that you are aware of. That is why you are so eager to sow discord? However, there is no point in trying to sow discord. The ones who took action were the forces under the Morgue Village Alliance, not the Morgue Village itself. We are all from the Northern Yen sections. Why would the Northern Fluttering Snow City fight to the death with the Morgue Village over such a small matter? As long as the Morgue Village gives an explanation, this matter will be considered over. You are trying to sow discord between the Northern Fluttering Snow City and the Morgue Village. Do you think I am an idiot?" Chapter 5:19. Both the Morgue and the Northern Drifting Snow City belonged to the Northern Yen sects, and the distance between them was not too far. Usually, there would be some friction between the Morgue and the Northern Drifting Snow City. However, this was very normal and the friction was not serious. Both sides had been restraining themselves. It was the same even now. Even if Bai Hantian was angry that the Morgue had crossed the line and caused trouble, he would not be provoked by Chu Xiu into fighting to the death with the Morgue. Chu Xiu smiled and said, "City Lord Bai, I'm not trying to sow discord. You want peace but the Morgue doesn't. The Northern Drifting Snow City has been around for thousands of years and it's past the time for crazy expansion. The most important thing is to protect their own foundation and then gradually expand." However, the Morgue had only been established for a few decades and Ye Renlong wanted to lay a solid foundation for the Morgue before he died. To be more precise, the Morgue needed to expand now. Believe me, this is not a misunderstanding. If you don't believe me, City Lord Bai, you can go and ask the people at the Morgue and see if they're willing to hand over those who broke the rules to you. If the Morgue really doesn't have such intentions, then City Lord Bai can just think that I'm trying to sow discord and kick me out at any time. However, if what I said is true, then I hope City Lord Bai can make preparations and nip the Morgue's ambitions in the bud as soon as possible. At this time, if you and I join forces, the Northern Drifting Snow City will not lose out. After saying that, Chu Xiu did not say anything else. He directly left his current residence to Bai Hantian and turned to leave. He had no intention to sow discord. Behind him, Bai Hantian's expression did not change. Although he would not be so easily provoked by Chu Xiu, he also did not understand the current situation in the morgue manner. Hence, Bai Hantian decided to meet Nie Renlong to find out what he wanted. However, what Bai Hantian did not know was that if he met Nie Renlong according to Chu Xiu's instructions, the two of them would most likely end up parting on bad terms. If it were not for Chu Xiu, Bai Hantian would have sent someone of Bai Qinhu's level to negotiate with the morgue village instead of going there himself. But now, with Chu Xiu's words, Bai Hantian couldn't help but want to take the initiative to take a look and see what the loyalty manor was up to. When two martial Dao grandmasters discussed these things together, they would either succeed or fail. Both of them were people who cared about their reputation. Once they met, there was no turning back. Moreover, Chu Xiu knew that the morgue would most likely not be able to come up with an explanation that Bai Hantian wanted. Regardless of who was right or wrong, as long as Nie Renlong decided to take a step back in front of Bai Hantian, his so-called morgue alliance would immediately become unstable. It was an alliance that had just been established a few days ago. Everyone could only fight battles that went well and only see benefits. Once they encountered a setback, the consequences would be dire. After Chu Xiu left, Bai Wuji snorted softly and said, "I think that the people from Diabolism are right. The morgue village should be suppressed, or else the Nie father and son would not even know their surnames." Ever since Nie Donglu became Han Baxian's disciple, he became more and more high profile. The morgue village also began to show a strong aggressiveness. If we join forces with Pang Hu's Qilian village, we can really deal a heavy blow to the morgue village. Bai Wuji's relationship with Nie Donglu had never been good. Bai Wuji's ranking on the Longhu leaderboard was not as high as Nie Dongliu's. However, in the northern Yan region, Bai Wuji's reputation was not inferior to Nie Dongliu's. But after Bai Wuji was seriously injured by Shen Bai's sword, he went into closed-door training, while Nie Donglu became the disciple of the northern Yan martial artist, Han Baxian. So, the gap between their reputations was huge. Even in the northern Yan region, most people thought that Bai Wuji was not as good as Nie Donglu. Bai Wuji was seriously injured by Shen Bai last time. He was not as arrogant as before, but he still thought that he was not inferior to Nie Donglu. He was not as good as Shen Bai and Chu Xiu, who had crippled Shen Bai. How could he not be better than Nie Donglu, who only knew how to plot in the dark? Bai Hantian waved his hand and said, "Wuji, sometimes you are too impulsive. There are times when it is necessary to be radical, and times when it is necessary to be cautious. Now is not the time to be radical. I will personally go to the morgue village to discuss this matter with Nie Renlong. Nie Renlong is not an idiot. I believe he will give me an explanation." Hearing Bai Hantian's words, Bai Wuji and Bai Qinhu did not speak. Bai Hantian had been in charge of the northern floating snow city for so many years, he naturally had his own plans. Liaodong County, in a large mansion in a small town near the northern lands. This place was originally the temporary hiding place of the Qilian stockade, but it was recently discovered by the morgue village. After the morgue village killed the remnants of the Qilian stockade, this place became the morgue village's temporary residence. At this time, in the attic of the mansion, Nie Renlong was sitting by the window, wearing a white fox fur coat. There was a pot of tea on the table, enjoying the snowy scenery outside. Nie Renlong entered the Jianghu when he was in his teens, experiencing the dangers of the Jianghu, scheming and killing. It took him half his life to build the morgue village. Along the way, there had been people who had betrayed Nie Renlong. Of course, Nie Renlong had also betrayed others. Gratitude and resentment, right and wrong, had long been unclear. That young hero, Nie Renlong, who had sworn to uphold justice in the righteous village, had long since died. The only one who was alive now was the scheming village chief of the righteous village. Staring at the falling snowflakes outside the window, Nie Renlong held the teacup in his hand but did not drink. He did not know how long it had been since he was so free. This time, Nie Renlong only controlled the overall situation of the battle against the northern land's 36 bandits. Some of the details were all handled by Nie Donglu. Although Nie Renlong was not old, he was not young either. Therefore, he had to let Nie Donglu completely control the Morgue village while he was still alive. He had to have enough prestige in the Jianghu, so that the Morgue village could really take root in the northern Yen and continue to exist for thousands of years. Fortunately, his son was good enough. At least for now, it seemed that Nie Donglu had done well enough, even beyond his imagination. At present, the young talents in the Jianghu, whether it was Zhang Qingjin, Zhong Xian or Fang Qishao, all relied on their own talent to reach this stage. Only Chu Xiu could be considered to have risen from the wilderness. Nie Donglu did not have such talent, but Nie Renlong did not care. In his opinion, some things were 70% man and 30% God. If he did not fight, even if he had 30% God's will, he would still be frustrated. Nie Renlong thought that when he was young, he was also a penniless, stupid boy from the wilderness. Now, did he not become the leader of the Morgue village of the 6 gangs? Nie Donglio's starting point was much higher than his. His son's future achievements should also be higher than his. At this moment, there was a sound of people coming upstairs. Nie Donglio's expression was a little gloomy. Just as he sat in front of Nie Renlong and was about to say something, Nie Renlong waved his hand and poured a cup of tea for Nie Donglu. In a deep voice, he said, "Don't panic. Every time something big happens, you have to be calm. The sky has not fallen, so why panic? Drink a cup of tea and speak slowly. Remember, if you are in charge of the Morgue village in the future, do not show this expression in front of anyone. Hide your joy and anger in your heart and not show it on your face." Nie Donglu nodded and finished his tea. Then he said coldly, "Father, those people really need to be punished. I've already told them not to cross the border and go to the northern lands, but they're still doing it in secret. They really deserve to be killed." Nie Renlong also frowned and stroked his beard. "It's a bit difficult. Benefits are at the front. Not to mention you, even if it was me, these people might not listen. The alliance has just been formed, and it was my Morgue village who invited them to join. These people are a bit arrogant because they are spoiled. However, this matter cannot be done forcefully. If they are my subordinates, you can kill 1 or 2 of them as a warning to others. But these people are not my subordinates yet. Don't talk about killing them. If you take a hard stance, it will cause people's hearts to waver. For now, send people to keep an eye on them and find a chance to make some noise to warn them. Don't let them go too far." Nie Donglu nodded. Just now, when he said these people should be killed, he was actually just saying it out of anger. He also knew that this group of people could not be killed now. Just as Nie Donglu was about to say something, a heroic voice suddenly rang out. "Brother Nie, since you are in Liaodong, why don't you come to my northern fluttering snow city as a guest? Are you looking down on me?" As the voice fell, a figure wearing a white tiger skin cloak leaped up to the 2nd floor. He was tall and sturdy, with azure blue eyes. It was Bai Han Tian. Seeing Bai Han Tian come, Nie Renlong and Nie Donglu cursed at the same time. They guessed that he was here for this matter. However, Nie Renlong's expression did not change. He still smiled and said, "Brother Bai, please don't be offended. My Morgue village has been too busy recently, so I can't find the time. When I have time, I will definitely pay a visit to the northern fluttering snow city." Bai Han Tian's smile disappeared. "Too many things? I know that you are busy invading my territory in the northern lands, right?" Nie Renlong smiled bitterly. "Brother Bai, you misunderstood. These things were caused by some of the forces under the Morgue village alliance. I was just talking to Donglu about this matter. I will find a chance to restrain them." Seeing that Nie Renlong did not hide anything, Bai Han Tian's expression became a little better. He nodded and said, "Since Brother Nie has said so, then I will not pursue this matter any further. Hand over the people in your alliance, so that I can go back and answer to the martial arts forces in the northern lands. This matter will be over." However, when Nie Renlong heard this, his expression suddenly changed. Chapter 520. Nie Renlong was actually someone who followed the rules of the pugilistic world. It was precisely because he liked to scheme that he followed the rules. People who didn't follow the rules usually didn't need to scheme. Just like Chin Di, if he was unhappy with something, he could just throw a punch. This time, the people from the morgue had crossed the line. Logically speaking, he should be the one to hand them over and punish them, but this time, he couldn't. Previously, Nie Renlong told Nie Donglu not to make a big deal out of this. The morgue alliance was still very fragile. If something went wrong, it would fall apart. Nie Renlong knew very well why this group of people joined the righteous manner. After the alliance stabilized, Nie Renlong could do whatever he wanted to them. By then, they wouldn't be able to leave the morgue alliance. But now, no matter how big a mistake they made, Nie Renlong had to protect them. At this moment, Bai Hantian saw Nie Renlong's expression and recalled what Chu Xiu had said before. The smile on Bai Hantian's face gradually disappeared. He coldly said, "Why, Manor Lord Nie doesn't intend to hand them over? You don't intend to give an explanation to my drifting snow city?" Hearing Bai Hantian address him as Manor Lord Nie instead of Brother Nie, Nie Renlong hurriedly said, "Brother Bai, that's not what I meant. This is just a misunderstanding. They are all members of my alliance. If I were to hand them over now, where would the prestige of the alliance go? So, my morgue is willing to compensate you in other ways. As long as Brother Bai is satisfied, it's fine." Bai Hantian coldly snorted and said, "Your morgue wants prestige, but my drifting snow city doesn't? Cut the crap, I don't want anything else from your morgue. I only want those people who acted recklessly. Are you going to hand them over or not?" Nie Renlong frowned. Based on his understanding of Bai Hantian, he shouldn't be so overbearing. But now, Nie Renlong could only be a little more forceful and said, "Brother Bai, it's not that I don't want to hand them over, but I can't. How about this, after I'm done here, I will personally bring the items to your drifting snow city to apologize. What do you think?" On the other side, Bai Hantian was also frowning. The more Nie Renlong refused to hand over the man, the more suspicious he became. Based on Nie Renlong's personality, he should not have refused such a request. But now, Nie Renlong's attitude was unyielding. This was clearly not in line with Nie Renlong's usual style. This made Bai Hantian suspicious. Could it be that the morgue was really going to make a move against the northern lands? Bai Hantian snorted coldly and said, "Good, good, good. Villa Master Nie is indeed loyal. However, even if you are loyal to the members of your Loyalty Villa Alliance, the Northern Fluttering Snow City must also be responsible for the martial arts forces of the northern lands. This matter is not over." After saying that, Bai Hantian's body moved and in an instant, he had already leaped out of the loft, disappearing into the snowstorm. Nie Renlong sighed, "I wonder what kind of medicine Bai Hantian ate. His attitude is actually so impulsive. This time around, we have offended the Drifts Now city of the extreme north." Nie Donglu said in a deep voice, "Then father, should we be more vigilant against the Drifts Now city of the extreme north?" Nie Renlong waved his hand and said, "Don't worry. For such a small matter, the Drifts Now city of the extreme north will not take action. We are not attacking the disciples of the Drifts Now city. But looking at Bai Hantian's attitude, I am afraid he will come looking for trouble. It is better to be more careful than not." Nie Donglu nodded, but he still felt that something was not right. It should be said that after the people of Chilian Stockade retreated, he felt that something was wrong. It was as if someone was manipulating everything. It was a very strange feeling, and Nie Donglu could not find any evidence. This was only his own feeling. Under the premise that there was no evidence, Nie Donglu did not dare to speak recklessly. Now, Nie Donglu could only hope that his feeling was wrong, that he had been too busy recently and that it was an illusion. After returning to the Drifts Now city of the extreme north, Bai Hantian's face was gloomy. Bai Wuji saw that Bai Hantian's expression was a little strange. He hurriedly asked, "Father, is the morgue village not willing to hand over the person?" Bai Hantian nodded and said, "That demonic brat was right. The morgue's attitude is a little strange. Even if the morgue doesn't want to attack the northern lands this time, I'm afraid they have other plans." Bai Wuji heard this and said coldly, "Then father, what are you waiting for? If people don't offend us, we won't offend them. Since the Morgue village dares to cause trouble in our northern lands, then I, the Drifts now city of the extreme north, will let them see who is the king of the northern lands. A force that has been rooted in a land for a long time, this in itself represented a kind of foundation and strength. The full name of the Drifts now city was Drifts now city. The reason why the outside world called it the Drifts now city of the extreme north was because of the foundation that the Drifts now city had been rooted in the northern lands for thousands of years. The Drifts now city represented the northern lands, and the northern lands represented the Drifts now city. Therefore, forces like the Drifts now city of the extreme north were very sensitive to their own territory. You can come if you want, but you have to inform them beforehand. If you break the rules and cross the line, the enmity between the two sides would be formed. Bai Han Tian said solemnly, "Don't be in a hurry. Go find that kid from the Hidden Devil clan. I want to see what he wants to cooperate with us." Also, Wuji, can you be a little calmer? After being in seclusion for such a long time, haven't you tempered your temperament? Bai Wuji lowered his head and didn't speak. Previously, after being injured by Shen Bai's sword, Bai Wuji's character was less arrogant, but he was more radical in handling matters. Just like this time, if Bai Wuji was in charge of this matter, and the Morgue village dared to provoke the Drifts now city of the extreme north, he could just directly take action. Perhaps Shen Bai's sword strike had left a very deep impression on him. Now, Bai Wuji's way of doing things was very simple and direct. He loved to use strength to solve all problems. Chu Xiu did not go far, but stayed directly outside the Drifts now city of the extreme north. When he saw Bai Han Tian again, Chu Xiu smiled and said, "Seems like City Lord Bai, you still haven't gotten the person. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here again." Bai Han Tian stared at Chu Xiu, his eyes emitting a blue glow. He said slowly, "I didn't get the person, but why do I feel that something is wrong? The ones who benefit in the end are the people from your Qilian stockade. Are you the one who instigated this?" As the city lord of the Drifts now city of the extreme north, Bai Han Tian was certainly not an idiot. Although he had no evidence, from Bai Han Tian's point of view, the ones who would benefit in the end would definitely be the people from Qilian stockade. It was originally a battle between the Morgue village and the Qilian stockade, but in the end, the Drifts now city of the extreme north was the innocent party involved. Bai Han Tian felt that something was amiss. Chu Xiu smiled and said, "City Lord Bai, I'm not the one who instigated this. Even if I denied it, you wouldn't believe me. Even if you insist on it, you have no evidence. But look at the Morgue village's route of action and you'll know. The Morgue village wants to expand, not to the west or south, but to the north. They say that their target is only the Qilian stockade, and that they only want to kill the remaining bandits. Do you believe that?" Bai Han Tian remained silent. He and Yarenlong had known each other for more than 20 years. He knew very well that the owner of the Morgue village, Nye, was a person who would not do anything unless it was for his own benefit. Everything he did was either for his own benefit or for his reputation. The Morgue village would not be so kind as to help the imperial court eradicate the remaining bandits. Chu Xiu continued, "So, even if you, City Lord Bai, chose not to do anything in this matter and chose to bear with it, once the Morgue village has completely stabilized its power in Liaodong and become neighbors with the Drifts now city of the extreme north, can you guarantee that there won't be any conflicts? How can you allow others to snore next to your bed?" The Great Light Temple can be neighbors with the Drifts now city of the extreme north because the difference between the two is huge. But the difference between the Drifts now city of the extreme north and the Morgue village is not that huge. Chu Xiu's previous provocation and threats did not move the Drifts now city of the extreme north. But his words, "How can you allow others to snore next to your bed?" made Bai Han Tian's heart tremble. In the past, the Drifts now city of the extreme north was in a very comfortable geographical location. As the neighbor of the Drifts now city of the extreme north, the Great Light Temple's power was too strong. It was so strong that it was not on the same level as the Drifts now city of the extreme north. It was impossible for the Drifts now city of the extreme north to feel threatened. Although the extreme evil sect of the Northern Plains was a demonic sect, They kept a very low profile and did not have any conflicts with the Drifts Now city of the extreme north. The Liaodong County in the east did not have any forces that could make a move. The Qilian stockade could only be considered half of it. The bandits' foundation was too shallow and could not be considered a force at all. So all these years, the Drifts Now city of the extreme north had never worried about any external problems. But if the Congregation Manor became neighbors with the Drifts Now city of the extreme north, Niarenlong was not the kind of person who would submit to others. When the time came, the result of the conflict between the two sides could be imagined. Chu Xiu looked at Bai Hantian and said faintly, "City Lord Bai, I have a habit. I always like to nip danger in the bud. It's simple and saves effort. Sometimes, I would rather kill the wrong person than let the wrong person go. I think this is a very good habit. What do you think, City Lord Bai?" Bai Hantian was silent for a moment and finally said, "I want to meet with Pang Hu." There was no expression on Chu Xiu's masked face. But under the mask, a smile appeared on Chu Xiu's face. Of course. Even if Chu Xiu represented the Hidden Devil clan, he was still a martial artist at the unity of heaven and man realm. Bai Hantian would not be at ease to discuss such an important matter with Chu Xiu. Only Pang Hu had the right to speak to him on equal terms. Now that Bai Hantian was ready to meet with Pang Hu, it proved that the matter had been settled. Although the two of them had agreed to meet in the north, it was not in the Drifts Now city of the extreme north. Pang Hu did not trust Bai Hantian. But when Bai Hantian and Pang Hu met again, both of them sighed. Who would have thought that the two of them, who had fought to the death in the past, would one day join forces? Chapter 521. Bai Hantian and Pang Hu had known each other for a long time. They had even fought against each other several times. At that time, most of the martial arts forces in the northern Yen had joined forces to kill the 36 northern bandits. The northern floating snow city was one of the main forces, so the two of them were no strangers. However, when they met again, Pang Hu no longer felt any hostility towards Bai Hantian. One of the reasons was that the imperial court was the one who took the lead in wiping out the 36 northern lands bandits. The second reason was that Pang Hu had also thought it through. The 36 northern lands bandits had been too high profile. If he was in the position of any other northern Yen sect, he would not be able to hold back and take action. However, although Pang Hu could ignore the enmity, it did not mean that he would be nice to Bai Hantian. When he saw Bai Hantian, Pang Hu could not help but sneer. "Bai Hanan, weren't you clamoring to kill us bandits and roving bandits? Why, are you in a hurry to cooperate now?" Bai Hantian also sneered. "It's your Qilian village that's in a hurry to cooperate, okay? Don't you know who it was that was almost exterminated by the righteous manor?" Seeing that the two of them were about to quarrel again, Chu Xiu quickly said, "Calm down, both of you. Since we want to join forces, let's put aside our previous grievances. Otherwise, it will be embarrassing if we start fighting before we even see the enemy." Bai Hantian and Pang Hu snorted at the same time. Pang Hu pointed at Chu Xiu and said, "My Qilian village will be under Master Lin Ye's command. You can talk to Master Lin directly." Hearing Pang Hu's words, Bai Hantian was a little surprised. He did not expect that everything in Qilian village would be under the command of this demonic brat. He had originally thought that this brat was just a lobbyist. However, at this moment, Bai Hantian suddenly remembered something. He suddenly looked at Chu Xiu and said, "You're Lin Yi, the Lin Yi from the Yinma clan, the one who killed Xiahou Wujiang from the Xiahou clan?" Chu Xiu nodded and said, "Yes." Pang Hu asked curiously, "Is Master Lin very famous in Jianghu?" Bai Hantian looked at Pang Hu speechlessly. Was this guy really stupid or was he just pretending? The person he invited had handed over the authority to command Qilian village. In the end, Pang Hu's understanding of Lin Yi was not even as good as his. Was this guy a joke? Actually, Pang Hu really did not know about these. After all, Qilian Stockade Village was just a bandit organization. They did not have that much information. Of course, they would not be able to find out some secrets about diabolism. In any case, he only knew that Lin Yi was sent by Mei Qinglian, and that Mei Qinglian would not harm him. Pang Hu only needed to know this point, and that was enough. As for Bai Hantian as the city lord of the northern Drifts Now city, although he didn't participate in the previous great war between the righteous and demonic sects on Floating Jade Mountain, news of the resurgence of the demonic path had spread throughout the pugilistic world. Lin Ye's identity had also entered the eyes of many righteous sections. Inma clan's clan leader, Inma sect and Phaseless demon sect are very fond of you. Even the Inma clan's clan leader, Jade-faced demon, Wei Shuya, thinks highly of you. The Inma clan's clan leader, Inma sect and Phaseless demon sect are very fond of you. Even the Inma clan's clan leader, Jade-faced demon, Wei Shuya, thinks highly of you. During the Inma clan leader's clan leader, you easily killed the Xiahou clan's most outstanding disciple, Xiahou Wujiang. I'm afraid your strength is enough to rank in the top 10 of the Longhu leaderboard. Pang Hu looked at Bai Hantian and did not say anything. Mei Qinglian had said that Lin Ye's strength was enough to rank in the top 5 of the Longhu leaderboard. Chu Xiu smiled and said, "It's just a title. Governor Bai, you don't have to praise me. Compared to you, I'm still a junior." Bai Hantian did not say anything. If the information was correct, this was a young talent that the Inma clan had focused on grooming. Although he was a junior now, after a period of time, he might be on the same level as him. Bai Hantian waved his hand and said, "Since Qilian village has entrusted everything to you, young Master Lin, then please tell us your plan." Chu Xiu squinted his eyes and said, "With Governor Bai's participation, my plan is actually very simple. It's nothing more than luring the enemy and killing them. However, Rinlong and his son are cautious people. For luring the enemy, we need to add a heavy bait. I'll have to trouble you to be the bait, Chief Pang. The people from the Village of Honor know that Chief Pang is the leader of the Qilian village. That's why the Village of Honor wants to kill you the most. The last time you fought with the Stone General, Han Baxian, you suffered some injuries. Although your injuries have healed, you should find a chance to pretend that your injuries have not healed. You can recuperate somewhere and lure the Village of Honor to go all out. We only need to lie in ambush nearby." Bai Hantian frowned. Anyone could think of such a simple trick. However, the key question was, would the Village of Honor fall for it? Whether it was Nie Rinlong or Nie Donglu, both of them were shrewd people. They wouldn't be fooled so easily. Seeing through Bai Hantian's thoughts, Chu Xiu said lightly, "Governor Bai, don't worry. I have people at the Village of Honor." Bai Hantian's heart skipped a beat when he heard Chu Xiu's words. They were obviously on the weaker side, yet this guy had planted an undercover agent at the Village of Honor? At this time, Bai Hantian also suspected that the Village of Honor had invaded the north. Was it also the work of the undercover agent? However, this thought only appeared in Bai Hantian's mind for a moment before it was thrown to the back of his mind. There was no point in thinking about it now because Bai Hantian had already appeared here. Moreover, the real reason why Bai Hantian decided to take action was the threat of the Village of Honor. Even if the Village of Honor did not invade the north, if the Village of Honor became the neighbor of the drifting snow city in the far north, Bai Hantian could not guarantee that Nie Rinlong would develop in peace. Just as Lin Yi had said, it was the simplest and most direct way to kill the danger before it happened. A few days later, in the temporary stronghold of the Village of Honor, Nie Donglu once again heard about the alliance's men disobeying orders and heading to the north without permission. This group of people had committed the same offense again and again. Nie Donglu had reached the limit of his tolerance. So, he went to Nie Rinlong and said angrily, "Father, we should deal with this group of people seriously. If this goes on, where are the rules of the alliance?" Nie Rinlong's expression was also gloomy as he nodded and said, "We can't go on like this. Go and find those people." When Nie Rinlong had found Miao Chun Mao and the others, before he could reprimand them, Miao Chun Mao said excitedly, "Villa Master, we found traces of Pang Hu. Most of the Qilian village's survivors are there." Nie Rinlong was stunned when he heard this. He hurriedly asked, "Is what you said true?" Miao Chun Mao hurriedly said, "Of course it's true. No wonder we haven't found any traces of the Qilian village's survivors after such a long time. It turns out that they're hiding in the north. Besides, when Senior Han fought with Pang Hu last time, Pang Hu was seriously injured. Pang Hu is in the north collecting some rare spiritual medicine to heal his injuries. No wonder the Qilian village retreated in such a hurry. It turns out that Pang Hu has not recovered from his injuries. Villa Master, take this opportunity to catch them all in one fell swoop. Nie Renlong nodded. No wonder Pang Hu retreated. It turned out that Pang Hu's injuries were not light. However, Pang Hu was actually in the north. This was a little tricky. Not long ago, Bai Han Tian had just come to find him. If he were to go to the north again and bring so many people with him, it would inevitably cause some misunderstandings. Nie Donglu also said, "Father, let's handle this carefully first. Send someone to keep an eye on them. Wait until we understand their strength before we make a move." Hearing Nie Donglio's words, Miao Chunmao became anxious. Lin Yi had asked him to lead the people from the memorial hall to the ambush position. As long as he succeeded, he and the Miao family would be fine. However, Lin Yi had not taught him how to do it in detail. He had to rely on himself. If he failed this mission, then his hiding during this period would be in vain. The Miao family would also be in danger. Miao Chunmao suddenly had an idea. He suddenly said, "Villa Master, we can't wait any longer. When we came back, we left a few warriors behind to guard the place. However, I neglected that the people left behind to guard the place are too weak. They might be discovered by Pang Hu at any time. If they didn't keep their mouths shut and leaked the news, Pang Hu and the others would have already moved." Nie Renlong frowned and said, "Since you know that they are from Qilian village, why didn't you send some warriors with enough strength to guard there?" Miao Chunmao put on an ashamed expression and said, "I didn't think it through. When we came back, I realized that I did something wrong." Nie Renlong frowned and said, "If that's the case, then immediately gather people and prepare to make a move. Alright, Donglu, go and invite Brother Han here. This time, I'll have to trouble Brother Han to make another move. Even though that Pang Hu is still heavily injured, it's still better for us to be a little more cautious." Nie Donglu nodded and went to invite Han Baxian over. In all fairness, his master treated him very well. When the memorial hall invited him, Han Baxian did not hesitate and immediately came to help. However, Nie Donglu did not know why there was still a haze in his heart. It made him feel a little uneasy. At this time, outside the small northern city of Shuilian City, the memorial hall and dozens of warriors from the alliance had all arrived and surrounded the entire city. Shuilian City was very small. It was just an ordinary dirt city, the kind where you could see from the south to the north at a glance. The Morgue Village Alliance had only sent out less than 10,000 people. However, these 10,000 people were the elites of the Morgue Village and the Alliance. The weakest among them was in the innate realm. It was very easy for them to kill the people from Qilian Village. At this time, beside Nrenlong stood a tall, burly middle-aged man in black armor. The burly middle-aged man's aura was vigorous and violent. His power was even stronger than Nie Renlong's. This person was Nie Donglio's master, the Northern Yen martial artist, Stone General Han Baxian. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Immortal Journey YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.